everybody. Let's kick this thing off. Okay. If you're glad to be here, say a big amen. Amen. Boy, am I glad to be here. I tell you, yesterday was a nightmare. Delta canceled, as of June 1, 100 flights a day for the summer. So if you're planning on traveling, and I understand it's not just with them. I've traveled a Legion for the last 2 months as well, and they've canceled flights on me. So yesterday was kind of a nightmare. But I'm glad to be here, and somewhere around 6 o'clock today, we're going to have a graduation ceremony. Is that right? I'm just joking with you. We'll start at 10 o'clock, okay? No, it'll be after lunch for sure. And let's see here. Let's try to get this thing working. All right. ISACAR Executive Leader Impact is what the Executive Committee called this entire initiative, which was a benchmarking initiative with the Church of God. And by the way, Bishop, let me just go ahead and say thank you for allowing, encouraging, scheduling you and your team and your state council have made all this happen. And I'm going to tell you, one of the best in the Church of God, right here. I have been bragging on you to the executive committee, to you, the state, to everyone that I've come in contact with. I think that you have modeled the way as to how this ought to be done, and I'm just very, very thankful. Let's give them another round. We don't know this place, so what do? Ambiguity and complexity. Complexity is next. Multiple key decision factors. How do you make decisions in a time where there are so many variables? And then ambiguity, a lack of clarity about the meaning of an event. I'm going to say it this way, a lack of meaning about anything. People are defining everything the way they want to define it right now. Have you noticed this? No. It used to be that you could look up something in the dictionary and be pretty clear about a definition. Now, you can't. It's so many, ambiguity is everywhere. So it is a VUCA time. And here's the word, especially after yesterday, that I am saying is describing the moment that we find ourselves in right now. Disruption. Say it. Disruption. Everything's being disrupted. When I was in the airport yesterday, I left my house at 8 o'clock yesterday morning in Cleveland, Tennessee. And on my way to the airport, my flight in Atlanta that was leaving at 10:30 was canceled. On my way to the airport. What do you do in a time like that? When everything is just all of a sudden disrupted. And you get on the phone and you start calling around, you start trying to find another way to get there. And then you find that so many other flights have been canceled and there's not really a way that you're going to get there in time. I jump on the phone, get my wife started to call. She's done this for me for years and years and years, one of the best at it. And so we're trying to figure out how in the world am I going to be able to get there. I call Josh and say, look like I'm going to get there. What in the world are we going to do? Disruption is the word that really describes it all. And we've been seeing disruption along the way, haven't we? The dominoes have been falling. Restaurants can't get servers. I don't know where that's going to end up, to be honest with you. It's almost like restaurants are just going to have to cut back. They've already cut back. They can't seat people the way that they used to. It's taking longer to get your food. They even tell us at our General Assembly for the Church of God, don't expect any room service. Don't expect restaurants to be able to handle you. My goodness. At conventions even. And one of the reasons why Delta's cutting back is they can't find pilots. Pilots don't want to fly anymore. Restaurant people don't want to work anymore. What in the world's going on? There is a disruption. Supply chains. Young mothers can't get formula. I mean, you've seen all this, right? Yes. Craziness across it. Got plenty of product. It's just sitting out in the ocean at the ports. Truckers. What in the world's going to happen when the truckers decide they don't want to work anymore? It begins, I was in Atlanta yesterday, going from place to place, trying to figure out what to do, going everywhere I could to try and talk to somebody to get me up here to be with you, to get within 3 hours driving distance, anything, to get here. Go down to get on the train, and the train's broke down. All over the Atlanta airport. So everybody's walking in the underground tunnels. You go up to Buffalo Wild Wings to get a seat. Took 2.5 hours to get a seat at Buffalo Wild Wings. Of course, I didn't go to Buffalo Wild Wings. So I'm not just waiting on the wing for 2.5 hours. It's crazy, right? Disruption. This is what we call adaptive leadership. Say it out loud.
Adaptive leadership.
And listen. A certificate is not a cure-all, it's not a silver bullet. What we try to do is jumpstart something in you, try to ignite something in you called continuous lifelong learning. To give you some curiosity, to give you some tools to say, if you're going to make it, if you're going to be the best version of you, you're going to have to learn to adapt. You're going to have to learn to change. Even if you go and get yourself a terminal degree, a doctoral degree, a DMin, or a EDD, or a PhD, all you're doing is getting the tools to continually learn. You understand that? Because everything, all knowledge has a shelf life. About the time you graduate with something, about the time you get the certificate this afternoon, tomorrow, you need to come back to Leader Lab 4.0. Because shelf life, there's something new out there. Knowledge is doubling about every 12 hours now. And so this is why the rate of change is only going to get greater and faster. The speed of change. We have to learn to adapt. So this is a key term for those of you that like to grow, that like to learn, that like to help your team to learn. Look up resources pertaining to adaptive leadership. You can get plenty of TED Talks, you can get plenty of books, you can get other things about adaptive leadership because we have to adapt. And this is what adaptive leadership really means. You can have plan A. First of all, you need to plan. You need to have a plan. We've talked about this. Problem is, many of us don't have a plan. We're going from que sera, sera to que sera, sera. Whatever will be, will be. And you need to hear me. Now today I'm dialing up my directness. Is that okay? All right. This is my last day to be with you, so I'm going to try to push you. Listen to me. The que sera, sera. Hey there, Glenn. The que sera, sera life. I was looking for you. Your counterpart was hiding behind somebody else there. The que sera, sera kind of life won't work anymore. If you don't have a plan, you're really going to be in a hurry. You need to have a plan for yourself and for your team, for your family. You have a plan and work your plan. Say it. But you have to understand in this day of disruption, you not only have plan A, you also have what? Plan B. Because it's not if plan A gets disrupted, it will. It's when plan A gets disrupted. Or what are you going to do? You can't give up. Now, I'm going to be honest with you. There were several times yesterday when I wanted to give up. I just like to go back to the house. I spent 16 hours in an airport, and that was no fun. And I'm thinking to myself, my grandbabies are coming home from camp. I want to be there. I'm getting pictures and all this other kind of stuff. I could care less. It don't look like I'm going to get there. I'll just Zoom to Friday night and Saturday and just, cut this stuff and go. You can't give up, folks. You have to continue going because giving up is simply not an option. Say it out loud.
Giving up is simply not an option.
Now this one's good because some of you in this room have thought about giving up. Here's what we know. The VUCA, the volatility, the complexity, the uncertainty, the ambiguity, the disruption is causing people to stress to the max. We're having more divorces right now than we've had in the history of America. Do you know that? Coming out of COVID-19. And it didn't happen during COVID-19. We're beginning now to see the fallout of it. We're having more people report mental illness right now than in our history. This disruption is causing disruption. People are in pain. We would be remiss to think some of it wasn't in this room, because leaders are feeling it probably more than anybody. Burnout is at its highest rate in recorded history. People have been burning the candle at both ends, and now we're coming out of it and things just aren't the same. And here's the thing, say it again. And especially for those of us that are Christian leaders, it is just simply not an option. But we found a way yesterday, didn't we? Was last night okay? Yeah. Now, I was working on my end, but your team was working tirelessly on their end to make all of this happen. And even up to the very last minute, adaptive leadership means even at the very point of contact, you're having to work. Did you notice that? Yeah. Because everything kind of falls apart. But thank goodness for your team, especially Josh. I want to say thank you for working on this end. For those of you, I could watch those of you, what resources. All of us are better than one of us. And people jumped up here and was helping, and people were jumping in as a team, and we pulled it off. So let's give ourselves a hand. Now, I must say, some of you didn't like what I said. Maybe. But hopefully we'll be able to fix that. So today, at some point, we're going to try to talk about derailment prevention. This lab was not one of the competencies that our research discovered. This is a lab that I added myself, simply because of what I see across the spectrum of too many people getting derailed, of too many people having fatal flaws, blind spots, and somewhere along the way the momentum catches up with you. And what you're going to find out today is that you'll probably be surprised at what some of the derailers might be. But how many of you in this room want to finish well? Right? See, that's our desire, to finish well. But I want to tell you, those that get derailed, those that are overtaken by fatal flaws, were in a room at some point and said the same thing. I do not want to be derailed, but something happened. So I want you to pay attention today. Silence your phones, put them on airplane mode, whatever, but keep them available, because taking pictures is as good, sometimes better, than taking notes. There'll be plenty of things for you to take a look at. I want you to be in the room. I want you to participate. Those of you who are the chatty chats, the eyes like me, have to exercise self-control and say, maybe it's time for me to be quiet today, but no, maybe not. And then there are those of you who are introverts who need to exercise and dial it up and say, today's my day to talk, to ask a question, to make a comment, because this is a laboratory. It's a place to participate, to step outside of your comfort zone. As we move forward, I'll be gone, but those of you who decide to continue, and there are churches all across the Church of God now, where their church has decided to continue on and they're getting their people to take the trimetrics DNA assessment and to do the team report. So you can continue to order these. You just contact me, you go to our website, LeaderLabs.com, and you continue to do this. I'll pass on that same price for the 3 science assessment, $99. But if you decide simply to do the behavioral side of it, which if you're going to do your church, I honestly suggest you save the money and do the $50. This is just the disc, the behaviors. If you can afford to do your key staff and volunteers, I would do it hands down. You heard me talk about that last night. Who was it that asked me that question last night? Matthew, I think. Where were you? Wasn't it Matthew? Yeah. You asked me that question, and I said, this is what I would do. One of the first variables is that I would get my staff and my team to take this. If you don't use this, I happen to believe that the one that I use is the best assessment that does this. It measures what it's supposed to measure. You can get a lot of stuff off the internet from other folks. I don't know how valid and reliable they are. This stuff is excellent. So I would spend the money, and I'm passing my price on to you. So that's going to help you along the way. And then if you decide, once you get your team, I'd get as many to do it as possible, like especially your paid staff, but then I would do my key volunteers and so on and so forth, so that you could get a team report similar to what I showed you last night. And that's where, we also talked about that last night, that's where it gets deep, and you can begin to really unearth some really good stuff for your staff, and you get to see stuff that's really particular and specific and objective about your team. A couple more resources for you. Still, all of the videos are on my website. From the Todd Bolsinger stuff, you can get all that. Train the Trainers coming up in October. I have a waiting list. But as people step off the waiting list, if they do, I haven't had any yet, but if they do, then those people on the waiting list get pulled on. I've got lots of stuff. I brought a whole suitcase of stuff, but it's limited and they will go fast. Up here, I've got the videos of the 10 essential skills. $100 for 24 30-minute network quality videos. If you don't have those, get those while they're here. I might have 10 copies of those. Some of you have gotten them, some of you have not. They're great for you individually, but they're also great for you as a team. I brought some of the 10 essential skills books with me. They're limited, but I've got some, and I have a few of them in Spanish. So if you know someone who speaks Espanol, then you can get it that way. And then I've got lucky number 8, which is up here. Those are all $10. This afternoon, we're going to celebrate. Anybody ready to celebrate? I hope you are. We'll give you time before we start taking pictures and all that to comb your hair, shine your head, or whatever you got to do, depending on what that looks like up there. But you will be receiving your certificates this afternoon. All right, let's jump in. Thank you for letting me just share some of that with you. Now, that's not just self-promotion, folks. That's resources. And I think it's good stuff. And so I would avail, I can take you to water, but I can't make you drink. And you have to be a super leader, remember? So you get stuff, not for you, you get stuff for your team. And this stuff will help your team. The reasons for your behaviors, motivators, and intentions are like water in a deep well. But a person who seeks insight can draw them out. That's what we've been trying to do over these 4 meetings, these 4 weekends. We've been trying to seek insight. We've been using tools. We've been trying to dive deep and to really figure out what's happening in our lives. When we take a look at Scripture, the Scripture says to us that in those days, Israel had no king. All the people did whatever seemed right in their own eyes. It also said that everyone did as they saw fit. Boy, does that depict where we are today. That's why leadership is important. We need leaders. Say it out loud.
We need leaders.
We've got an overabundance of managers. I've been saying it across the Church of God. I've been saying it to the executive committee. I believe it. It's not just within the Church of God, though, so don't think that I'm just picking on us. It's a global problem right now in the marketplace, the corporate world, and in the ministry. But I think it is an especially difficult, perplexing problem when the church has too many managers and not enough leaders. Because of the time we find ourselves in. We've got to have some leaders. We can't be sitting in the stands any longer. We've got to get back into the arena. But Brother Cooper, the arena cost us something. It's tough to be a warrior and to be a gladiator. Because what most of us have found in our ministries, if you've been in this thing longer than a couple of months, is that getting into the arena costs you something. It hurts. Church people can hurt you. Should I say that again? Yes. Yeah. Church people can hurt you. The Bible says you fight not against flesh and blood, but against principalities and powers. In other words, people's not our enemy. But if there is an enemy, if there is a resistance, it's not really those outside the church. Here's the crazy part. It's those in the church. Go figure this one out. We got to survive the sabotage of relationships to make it today. And church people can hurt you. Well, everything that we've been doing has been built on this benchmarking initiative that I started 5 years ago. Went to Dr. Tim Hill and said, man, we got to do this in the Church of God. He endorsed it. And now we have more than 42. Larry Hasmatali is doing Canada now. We've got his district overseers later this month. He's doing his local pastors. So we will continue, hopefully, Bishop, with your help and Josh's help and others in our church that have done this process. For some of you that might know overseers in the Church of God, because they're the gatekeepers for this, after the assembly, whenever everybody knows where they're going to be, maybe we can continue this process across the Church of God. I'm hoping to get local churches to start doing benchmarks so that we can have more positions in the local church done. Here's what we know based on this. Out of the 25 competencies, this will be the last time, the last day that I'm showing this to you. So these are the times to grab some of these photos if you want to grab them. But out of 25 competencies, this is the way that it ranks in terms of the Church of God. And I want you to notice what was at the top of the list out of 40-something benchmarks right now, and that's leadership. Say leadership. Leadership. Number one competency that we need is leadership. And in this regard, leadership is different than management. And if you look at the top 9, normally we look at the top 8. You don't have to be good at everything. You just have to find 8. But several of them tied. So we choose the top 9. You begin to see the top 9 that if you are planning a leadership development program at your church, now this is different than theology and doctrine and so on. That's a given. That's foundational for us as ministry. But there's another side of the coin. Today, you're not just called upon to be the shepherd of a flock. You're called upon to lead an organization. And we've got to have some tools in our tool belt so that we'll be able to do that. And these are the things that I would try to have sessions on, trainings on. I would look for resources. If you do stuff with your staff, with your team, in your staff meetings, these are the kind. You bring in special speakers. If you have seminars or conferences, if you go to places, then these are the things that I would want to be developing my people on, because this is what we need in the Church of God. And these are the kinds of things that will develop what we call superheroes. Say superheroes. Superheroes. Superheroes are those people who understand that leadership development begins with self-development But it ends up with you being strong enough and knowing yourself enough to lead others. Because you can't help anybody if your own life is a mess. Say it out loud.
You can't help anybody if your life is a mess.
Yeah, that's why we say we're not just out to give you information. We want to see a change in behavior. And last time we were together, you were writing on pieces of paper. Remember that? These are the behaviors I want to change. I've seen your stuff. There's some stuff we need to change. But you know what? As I go across the Church of God, the things you wrote on your pieces of paper is the same thing people are writing all over the Church of God. It's amazing. We are different, but we are predictably different. We're all struggling with a lot of the same things, so don't think you by yourself. You're not. We're all in this boat together. But it's a thing of determination.
Hey, Fred, can I ask the question?
Yes, sir.
Can we go back one?
Yep.
You know, the thing that really alarms me is if you go down to futuristic thinking, which is 2%. I sure hope we've hired some folks from outside our denomination to focus in on that area, because if we don't, we're in trouble. You want to speak to that?
Yeah, and I get that a lot. Futuristic thinking is a very focused competency and topic, and we definitely need it. But here's what I have found out about futuristic thinking, and here's what I'm trying to say. And I'm going to be saying this more as we move forward. Futuristic thinking is a component of leadership.
Sure.
And you know that. You, I think, model the way for that as good as any AB that we have. And I say that about you when you're not with me. But futuristic thinking has to do with casting a vision. And you wouldn't believe people that aren't casting a vision because they don't have a vision. That's case sera life. If you don't know where you're going, then you're not going to know how, where in the world are you going to get there? Any path will work, right? Remember the Cheshire Cat in Alice in Wonderland? Where she says, which way do I go? He says, well, where are you going? And she said, I don't know. He said, well, it don't matter which way you go. Just go anyway. Right?
Right.
And this is the problem. But yes, sir, we got to have futuristic thinking. Somebody has to have a vision. Forward looking. This to me is the very basis of Issachar leadership. Understanding the times and knowing what the church should do. Knowing where the church should go. But what I do, what I'm trying to do, is pull that component up into leadership. And I'm going to deal with that in just a moment, because as we move forward, I'm going to share with you where I'm going, so that if you like this stuff and if you like what I do, then I'm going to give you some opportunities to jump on board as graduates, that you can get on board with stuff that's just exclusively for you to stay with me. And I'm going to be dealing a lot with this. How do we cast vision? How do we become futuristic? In fact, because you brought that up, I'm just going to, let's say, follow the leading of the Lord or follow the leading of the bishop. And let's hope that those two come together at some point.
We hope they're the same.
That'd be an awful idea, right? Let's see.
You're all the same.
I think I have something here. Unless I have lost it. Oh. Josh, come help me, buddy. Take the other side of that. When we talk about casting a vision, we talk about futuristic thinking, we talk about leadership being in the top. Nothing describes it better than a rubber band. And I've always thought to myself, I wish I had a big rubber band. And I was in Alabama a few weeks ago, and a guy brought me this. And he said, this will work. Vision is an interesting thing, and every church has got to have it. And Kyle, I'll bring it over there to you in just a minute. We'll see if we can get it that far without it popping. That's an interesting subject right there. Now he's thinking, oh, which way is he going to pop?
Hold on.
But that's a good idea too about vision, right? So here's the way vision is. Vision is an interesting thing. And if you do not have vision, if you don't have futuristic thinking, if you're not looking into the future, if you're not trying to adapt, know this, your iceberg is melted. And you can become extinct, especially in this time. And let me show you what a lot of people's life and church looks like. Where's it going to go? Okay? It should be reversed, but I'm going to do this to you, okay? Just because I can. You're the past. I'm the future. All right? So he's the past. And where's my church? Where's my life going to be if there is no future? It's not going to go anywhere, is it? But once you decide to take the first step outside your comfort zone, or cast a vision, or say to yourself, I'm going to change that behavior. See, that's a vision. No matter how simple it is. You got to start somewhere, ladies and gentlemen. You got to have futuristic thinking. You've got to have a vision of where my church is going to go, where am I going to go. And if you don't have a vision of where you're going to go, nothing else is going to work. We got to have healthy leaders before we can have healthy churches. Sometimes we wonder why my church isn't growing. Why am I not a mega church? Well, number one, I think we got the wrong goal out there. We need to become healthy leaders with healthy churches, doing the Great Commission, and then see what God does with that. And so, once you have a vision for yourself and your church, then you start seeing something like this. But I want you to notice something. Here, I'm the future. But the moment that I start pulling, what's happening?
Resistance.
Yes, sir. There's resistance. There is no growth without resistance. It is not easy. Personally or corporately. There's resistance. The past keeps pulling you back. And if you give up,
Right back.
then you go to another revival or you go to another seminar and you get inspired again. How many times have we done this? Anybody with me?
Yeah.
Anybody tired of this? How do you think your people feel? With no vision, with no futuristic thinking, with no leadership, with just management, this is all you have. This is just people shuffling in and out, Sunday to Wednesday to small groups, nothing ever changing. Just holding on till Jesus comes. Did I just say that?
Yeah.
In 4 Gospels, it's written in red because Jesus said it. He talked more about the kingdom of God, the kingdom of heaven, than anybody.
Yes.
And the kingdom of heaven, ladies and gentlemen, was not clouds and harps and us seeing the pearly gates.
That's right.
That is a reward. That is a given. That's going to happen. We focus way too much on that. The kingdom of heaven. Listen, here's what Jesus prayed. How many of you know the Lord's Prayer? Thy kingdom come.
Thy will.
Thy
Will be done. On earth.
In earth. Word the earth.
on earth. That's what. How many of us are living our lives in the kingdom? The leadership. Anytime you hear kingdom, it's leadership. There's a king leading. It's going somewhere.
Yes.
How many of us are leading our lives in the kingdom, living? He said, I've come that you might have and have it.
More. Come on now.
If any man or woman be in Jesus, they are a
New creature.
all things,
Our past.
all things.
Our
He's afraid this thing's gonna pop. It ain't gonna pop, Josh. Trust me. You trust me, Josh? Okay. Hey, it might pop on me. I don't know. If it does, it'll just be funny, all right? It'll hurt a little bit, but it'll be funny. Keep pulling. And the further you get away from the past, sometimes the more resistance there is. The past is always with you.
Yeah.
But you got to break free from it, ladies and gentlemen. To change. And to break free from it. Is he moving his hand now? He's I'm on metal. We got too many churches, Bishop, in the Church of God that have done this and this. Here's what happens. Leadership brings change. Not management. Leadership brings change. One word, management's about status quo. And we need management. Management pays the bills. Management's responsible. Leaders need managers to keep things going, organized, and all that right? We need that. But leadership is what brings the resistance and says, come on. We got to grow. We got to change. We got to adapt. We got to be relevant. Now, I'm not talking about relevance for relevance sake. I'm talking about relevance for survival. To be what God's called us to be. Right? He said, I'm a fountain of living water. And if you don't like change, we need to tell our people this. If you don't like change, you're not going to like heaven. Behold, I make all things new. Some people's going to be really, really sad when they get to heaven and it don't look like the 1950s. Your job's to help them change that paradigm. So you've got this. But about the time leadership really begins to take hold and to change, we promote them. And they leave us. Now, I'm not just talking about ABs. I'm talking about pastors primarily. This is what happens. Then that pastor says, ooh, there needs to be change in this church. And then he or she leaves. Another pastor comes in. How many times has this happened in a church over the years? Anybody with me? And then when a new pastor comes in, somebody stands up and says, whoa! Right about here. I was here when you came, I'll be here when you're gone. Why? We created that monster. Here's what we know. The greatest change, functional, healthy change, happens in churches where leaders decide to dig in and stay. Now, my two favorite words are, it depends. There's always, an outlier. There's always a reason to move. But here, I want to show you something. How long does it typically take before change actually occurs and becomes part of the culture? Here's what the research says. You get to the line of scrimmage to where you can make significant change at year 6 to 8. So in a church where we change leadership every 2 to 4 years, what are we doing every 2 to 4 years? Is this working for anybody other than me? But what happens when a pastor says, God called me here. And I'm going to stay here, and I'm going to overcome the resistance. I'm going to change, but the church is also going to change, and we're going to stay. Let me tell you something. You ready? Here's a revelatory statement. The problem also is that once you do stay 6 to 8 years, 10 years, here's what John Cotter says at Harvard, talking about change. He says the main problem is we declare victory too soon. You think that you've changed it and you can relax. But in change theory, they call them strange attractors. The past has strange attractors, and the futuristic thinkers have strange attractors. And what you're doing, you're either growing and changing healthy, because the strange attractors are more pulling than the strange attractors are that are pulling back. And when you declare victory too soon, those strange attractors in the past, Josh, pull me. They're still there. Keep going, pull me back. What happens is, look, keep pulling. You let your guard down, and some of those that you thought had disappeared, you start finding some of the same stuff coming back. Anybody seen this? You thought, I thought I was past that. They're there. Okay, you're here 6, 8, 10 years, you pulled the church over here, and you think that the past is gone, but a new pastor comes in. Guess what happens? Strange attractors say, if I'm going to pull this thing back, now's the time. So they pull it back. Therefore, the church is good. How often, now, that's the church. How often have you done this? And I'm going to leave it here. Aren't you so tired of this? Yes. What behavior are you going to stick to? What change are you serious enough about to say, I'm breaking free of the past dysfunction, addiction, habit, routine, whatever, and I'm going to become a different person? Yes. It all is because, Bishop, of vision. So yes, sir, futuristic thinking is very, very important. But I'm referring to it in a component called leadership. Self-leadership. If you don't lead you out of the past, you're always going to be held in the past. I made up my mind a long time ago. I ain't going back there. And I don't want to be a slave to that. I knew a guy one time that was a slave to his past. When he was 9 years old, his sister was shot to death in his front yard. 6 months later, his mother died of cancer. The little boy's daddy became an alcoholic. He went into the inner city to find security because he didn't have any other way to do it. From that particular place, he started doing drugs. He started selling drugs by the time he was 14, 15, 16 years old, grew his hair out really long, pierced his ears, had all kinds of dysfunctional life, but it was all because he was trying to take care of himself. Couldn't remember his 4th and 5th grade years because of the trauma, because of all that he had gone through, right? Sleeping in ditches, abandoned apartments, trying to just stay away from the alcoholic winos that were in his home with his dad, because his dad was trying to drown his grief from the loss of his wife and his lifelong partner. But here's this little boy trying to survive. And one thing led to another. By the time he's 16, 17 years old, he's busted 3 times, kicked out of his home state, kicked out of his school, sent away. It only makes him worse. He comes back, finds a young lady who says she's a Christian. He wants to date her. She says, absolutely not. I'm not going out anywhere with you. You're the worst person in the community. But he stays on her, trying to say, she says, okay, you got to go where I want you to go. She took him to a Pentecostal church one Sunday morning. He went into church for the very first time, altar call given. He goes to the altar, prays, and asks the Lord Jesus to change his life. He gets up out of that altar, walks out, and the preacher says, what was it that caused you to give your heart to Jesus? What did I say? He said, nothing you said. It's what I felt this morning. He said, we have church at 6:30. The young man comes back at 6:30 that night with his hair all cut off. Things had changed. He had went home and told his daddy, he said, I want to get my hair cut. He said he'd never seen his daddy move that fast in his entire life. Went and got his hair cut. Came back to church that night, 300 people in that Pentecostal church. Nobody even knew who he was. Finally, the pastor said, is that the young man that got saved this morning? He stood up and said, yes, sir. Never spoke in front of a crowd before in his entire life. Yes, sir, that was me. He said, testify. Unchurched people don't know what testify means. They don't know our vocabulary. They don't know our culture. But he thought it meant say something. So he got up and went up to and pushed the big preacher out of the way. He talked for 20 minutes about what he felt that morning. The altars filled and God came down and they had revival that night on a Sunday night. The next morning he walked into his school. You could have heard a pin drop on the carpet. People said, what in the world happened to that young man? And when he was asked the question, big gully tears would come out of his eyes, and he'd say, I met Jesus yesterday. It changed my life. And then he'd say to him, he'd say, meet me at church tonight at 7 o'clock. And he was going all over his school saying, meet me at church. Finally, the girl found him about 1 o'clock and said, you can't invite people to church on Monday night. We don't have church on Monday night. He said, we do now. For the next 11 weeks on Monday night, 70 to 100 teenagers met him and that girl to hear them talk about Jesus. That young man went on to be Mr. Personality of his senior year in high school, to letter in 3 different sports, be the first in his entire genealogy of 8 people in his life. He was the baby to graduate from high school, to go on and go to Lee University with no help and graduate debt-free and with honors. That young man went on to get his master's degree in theology, went on to pastor in the Church of God for 3 decades, to be best of the best pastors in Southwest Florida, to be best of the best pastors in East Tennessee from the Knoxville News Sentinel, to carry the Olympic torch, to run the Boston Marathon, to be a pastor in the Church of God, to go on and get his PhD in organizational leadership, to work in Southeast Asia for 11 years, and to build a city for the poor, and to create 3 different leadership development programs that are blessing people to this day. And here's the reason: because one Sunday, 3rd Sunday in January, he made a decision to trust Jesus Christ and to say, the past is not going to hold me any longer. Barely get to it. That's my story, ladies and gentlemen. And that's lucky number 8. Is it luck or something altogether different? Listen, this stuff is more than just a bunch of stuff to me. This stuff works. And the Lord will help you if you get serious enough about it. Self-control is a real thing. Becoming the best version of you is the real thing. But it's up to you. Father, in the name of Jesus, I pray for everyone in this building today. I pray, Lord, that you would help them to realize that they can change. They can be the best version of themselves. Take that thing that is holding them back, that thing, that dysfunction, that thing in their life, Lord, that is holding them back, keeping them from being the person you want them to be, and help them, Lord, to fight the resistance and to pull, to break free from that gravity, the dysfunction that is holding them. The same way you're doing it even now for me, do it for every person in this room in the name of Jesus. If you feel like the Lord is speaking to you and asking you to change, I want you to lift both hands right now and just talk to the Lord. Come on. You know what you're dealing with. You know what you're dealing with. But here, listen, you've got to be serious about this. Talk to the Lord right now. Whisper it to him. Tell him the specific thing that you know in your heart that you're going to change. You're going to break free from that. Something wonderful is going to take place in your life and in your heart.
Praise the Lord. Would you give God a hand of praise? I have never heard Fred's story. That's the first time I've heard your story.
I have a saying that I picked up from an 80-year-old pastor that has changed my life in ministry. The power is in the telling. The power is in the telling of your story. Because think how captivating that story was. Of course, I knew it was Fred because I knew your history after the ministry part. I didn't know the other part. I mean, you had a little bit in common. Anyway, moving along. Every one of you have a story that nobody else has. And nobody else can tell it like you. Because he didn't have to even think about that story. Because that's his story.
Yes.
And telling your story will produce more than you trying to pontificate words that you don't understand, scripture that doesn't mean anything to you, you just quote it because it's preaching. But the power of your story, a changed life, is the most powerful thing that you have. Don't fail to share your story. Would you give God praise? I've never heard that story. Praise God. Now, he's the kind of guy I want to go with me when I go into the streets of Philly.
Yes.
I don't know if I want to go. No. I've been there. I don't know.
But you know what I'm saying?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, you know, I asked my father, he was in the Korean War. I said, talk to me about the Korean War. I said, who did you like besides you in the foxhole? He said, I'll take a Turk anytime. He said, they're the craziest people and the most courageous fighters in the world. I don't know if you know anything about Turkey, but I mean, they're just awful. I mean, they're done awful. But they know how to fight. And guess what? When you get in the trenches, you can win a battle. You want them to take a break? Wait, I'll do. All right, well, Josh, you got any instructions for him? Sure. All right.
If you want those books, I'd get them. You know, anybody that's gone through this, that's what I wrote it for, in graphic detail, the whole story of how God brought me through that. So grab these, I'll be glad to sign them.
We're going to do your little thingy thing.
I'm going to do my thing. Okay, thank you for tolerating. What is it? Hey, you're right. See, you're already addicted to that, right? How many of you caught on to that before I was finished, that was me? Okay, some of you did. The Lord's good. Now it gives you a little bit of an idea, hopefully, as to why I do what I do. And the kind of programs that I've created are based on the stuff that I had to have to break free from that. And I'm still dealing with some of that. You can't go through what I did as a child and still not have repercussions. Isn't it interesting? And I wish I could say to you that Sunday when I got saved that all the consequences disappeared, but they didn't. There are consequences to our actions. And I still have to live with some of those. Lucky number 8 will tell you a lot of the details of that. If you didn't get the book or if you want to order some for someone else, LeaderLabs.com resources, you can find it there. And Shirley, my wife, will send it to you. You can order it there. All the other stuff you can order there. Or you can go to Amazon.com and you can order it there. Just make sure you get the right book, Lucky number 8. There's another one about gambling in Las Vegas by the same guy. That is not me. So don't get that book. Make sure you get Lucky number 8. Okay? And that is because I was the baby of 8. you'll read it. But it's an encouraging story, I think, for those that have tried to break free, and I think it says it can work, and it shows you the pathway as we move forward through that. So thank you for taking advantage of that again. We've got a long way to go this morning, so let's just jump right into it. Here's our foundational principles. The church is the hope of the world. Only one of you remembered. I say them, you repeat. The church is the hope of the world.
The church is the hope of the world.
Healthy leaders are the hope of the church.
Healthy leaders are the hope of the church.
There's a leadership crisis in the marketplace and the ministry. The crisis is a crisis of character, competence, and credibility.
Crisis is a crisis of confidence and credibility.
Go back.
I tell you, you're going to have to be fast. Remember what I said? You got to be quick draw with the camera.
Fast.
I know that voice. Yeah. All right, that's enough of that. Leadership development begins with self-development. How quickly you forget. We are a choir in chorus, not soloist in competition. Now that's a good statement. Right there. Anybody get that? You ought to put that on your visitors list. We are a choir in chorus, not soloist in competition. At this church, we operate as a team. You got too many people that want to be Diotrephes and have the preeminence among you. Right? Okay, let's go. Leadership development begins with self-development. Self-development begins with self-awareness.
Self-development begins with self-awareness.
Self-awareness leads to self-control and self-management.
Self-awareness leads to self-control and self-management.
Self-control leads to character, competence, and credibility.
Self-control leads to character and credibility.
And if you get all of that in combination, it should culminate in super leadership. Say super leadership.
Super leadership.
Now that's where you want to take a picture, right there. The slide is finished. Super leadership. Everybody ready?
Yep.
Okay, here's what super leadership is. A super leader is one who intentionally leads others to grow up, be interdependent, and lead themselves by acting as their coach, teacher, and equipper. We have got to get over self-promotion and self-protection. We have got to get past self-promotion and self-protection and realize that we develop people. We grow people. We mature people. We prepare people for life on planet Earth so that they can get to heaven, and so that while they're on planet Earth, they can be a witness for the kingdom. And so we have to get past this thing of being insecure that somebody's going to take our place or that someone is going to do better than us. The goal should be that we want multitudes to do better than us. That should be the goal. That multitudes do better than us.
Yes.
And that one day when we step before the pearly gates, yes, we want to see Jesus, but as the Apostle Paul did, what is my joy? What is my crown at his coming? Remember Paul saying that?
Yes, sir.
What is my joy? What is my crown at his coming? And, you know, a lot of us think, well, I just want to see Jesus. Well, I do want to see Jesus. But listen to what Paul said. What is my joy and what is my crown the day that I see him? Immediately after I see him, here's what he said. My joy and my crown, it's as if Paul turned and said, is it not you?
Right. Yes.
He turns and he wants to see a throng, a multitude of people coming into the kingdom because he was a super leader. Moses and Paul had something in common. There were 2 times in Scripture that God was going to kill people because they frustrated him. See, you're not the only one that gets frustrated with people. Remember? The children of Israel.
Yes.
He said, I'm just going to wipe them off. They got there that calf that they created. It took them 6 weeks after all all the miracles and change. So if you think your church is resistant to change, don't be too upset. After all the plagues, after the Red Sea, after all that, 6 weeks in, they're fussing about being in the desert, and they build a calf and want to go back.
Yeah.
6 weeks is all it took.
Yeah.
And that rubber band bounced right back. See, you got to hold the tension. And God said, I'm going to kill them. Here's what Moses said, if you're going to kill them, you're going to have to kill them.
That's right.
Super leader. The Apostle Paul comes along, and the Gentiles are coming into the kingdom, and God gets frustrated again. He says I'm just so frustrated, I'm not even going to fool with them anymore. And Paul said, if you're not going to fool with them, you're not going to fool with me. Don't do it, Lord. Super leaders. What? Their focus was people. They had compassion. They had mercy. They had the determination to make sure that they were bringing people into the kingdom.
Yeah.
That should be our goal. Our goal should be super leadership. Well, let's talk about the anatomy of self-sabotage. Because this is what will derail you, and it's the thing that I'm going to leave with you during this particular series of labs that we call LeaderLabs 3.0. When we talk about self-sabotage, we are talking about destructive behavior. Say behavior. Behavior. Have you realized that that's the key component and concept and term that we've been dealing with over these labs? Behavior. Say behavior. Behavior. It's the only thing that people see. They don't see your intentions, your ideas, your if you woulda, coulda, shouldas, your hopes and your aspirations. They see your behavior, and your behavior over time is what creates your reputation. Your identity is something completely different. Your identity is the story you're telling yourself, which a lot of the time is incorrect. Because we build a lot of our present based on an incorrect story that we're playing between our own ears. And we need to fix it and define truth. Jesus said truth would do what? Set you free. It would set you free. So self-sabotage is destructive behavior directed at yourself. At first, you may not even notice that you're doing it. But when negative habits and routines consistently undermine your efforts, they can be considered a form of psychological self-harm. Now, I know this for a fact. I could spend the rest of the day talking to you about the way I sabotaged myself after I got saved. The stuff that kept needling me, the routines and the habits that little by little, I had to figure out a way to break free from. And some of the things that was the hardest for me to break free from, you wouldn't even imagine. You'd think that it would have been the cocaine or the hallucinogenic drugs or, some of those types of things. But no, it wasn't that. It was other stuff, simpler, what seemed to be other small flies that ended up spoiling my life. And I had to keep working on those things, but those things consistently undermine your best intentions. We wonder why that rubber band thing happens. We go for a little bit and then we bounce back. We go a little. Why? Because something is sabotaging. And we can play the victim all day long. You can blame it on everybody else, but 99% of the time, see, there are outside influences that hit us and hold us back. But you've got to be determined to overcome that. There's always going to be biases, prejudices, selfish people, people that are out to get you, people that are mean. Even in the church, there are mean people. Anybody figured that one out? They smile at you, buddy, but they mean. They'll take a bite out of you real quick. I had something I was going to say, but I'm dialing it back. I'm going to dial it back. Anybody know what this little story is right here? See, this is how you end up sabotaging yourself. It's like the frog in the boiler. And I call this the value of the totally obvious. Because a lot of the things that sabotage you, a lot of the things that are undermining you, if you will, it's when a behavior is normalized, it becomes invisible. Say that out loud. That's good stuff right there. The reason why you show up sometimes in a way that you don't intend is because you don't see it. You've done it so long, it's become normalized. Now, before we really go any further, let's turn that coin over on the other side and let's give people a little bit of grace. Because sometimes when people treat us badly or rudely or whatever the case may be, they don't intend to do it. Now the outcome's the same, you got hurt, right? You were treated bad. But a lot of times they don't see it. Why? Because it's been normalized. They don't see it anymore. They don't know it. Something has to happen for them to have an aha moment, for you to have an aha moment, for you to have an epiphany. I had an epiphany this morning getting in the car. Where's the three people, Walter, that was riding in the car with me this morning? There's 2, 3. Now, I can't see the young lady. What's her name? Alicia. You three stand up for me. This is a simple illustration, but it is so true. Now, Walter came and got me this morning, and there were 2 people in the car. I could see 2 people. One was getting in the driver's seat. They left the passenger seat open for me, and then another sitting in the back seat. Who was the one sitting in the back seat? Okay, sitting in the back. I saw them. I got in the car. I'm sitting there, and I'm talking to these 2 people, right? And then all of a sudden, somebody says, Alicia's sitting right behind you. I didn't even see Alicia. I didn't know Alicia was there. And I didn't know Alicia was there. I had to turn around and say, Alicia, you there? Yes, I'm here. Paradigm shift. Did not see her, but she was there. Okay, give them a hand. Thank you. Thank you for picking me up, number one. And Alicia, thank you for forgiving me. Are you with me? Sometimes you just don't see it, right? So give people a break. They don't know that they're being prejudiced. They don't know that they're being biased. They don't know that they're being rude. They don't know that they're being mean. They don't know that they're being hateful. Now, some people do. That's a whole different ballgame, right? You got a gut feeling and discernment and intuition, and you pick up on when people got an attitude. Do people in Pennsylvania ever cop an attitude? I was in Atlanta airport yesterday with 10 billion people that were frustrated. And I could tell everybody had an attitude. So stay away from them. Stay away from people, right? But I'm not talking about attitudes. I'm talking about sometimes people just don't know. They just don't see. It takes an epiphany. It takes an aha moment. It takes, and watch this. The Bible talks about these kinds of experiences. I once was blind, but now I see. That's a paradigm shift. That Sunday when I walked into that Pentecostal church, and she didn't just take me to any church, she took me to a Pentecostal church, right? I saw stuff I'd never seen before. And the preacher said, "What did I say that caused you to come to the altar?" Nothing. He ended up being the greatest mentor of my entire life, Pastor Don Anderson, Elm Street Church of God, Kannapolis, North Carolina. He mentored me until his death, like a father. Took me into his home, and I'd never be who I am today, Pastor Anderson. But I said to him nothing. It was the experience and the Holy Spirit work. for the first time in my life, I saw people. Now, I know better now, but I didn't then, but to some semblance of the word, they had it all together. They were dressed nice. They were singing songs. They were smiling at each other during fellowship time. They were hugging and shaking hands and laughing. And they were having a good time. And the music was playing. And nobody was doing drugs or drinking. This was very different for me. And all I can tell you is when he gave the altar call, I didn't even know what the world all this was about. But I wanted what those people had. Never seen it before. And I was standing up against the wall and couldn't get out. There was 8, 10 people, old stained glass window here up against the wall, and the music's playing, you know, softly, and he's giving an altar service. He might have been giving it just for me because I was the outlier in the whole building. I was tall. But I reached over and I touched Carol on the back and took one step. Guess when I was saved? That moment. I didn't have a clue what being saved was, what being born again was. Didn't have that clue. There was just something going on inside of me that was pulling me to the altar. And I believed with all my heart, the moment that I touched her and did that, name wrote in the Lamb's Book of Life. Everything changes. And watch this. I'm a gang member, inner city, right? I'm a dealer of drugs. I had 8 marijuana lids in my closet at home and a whole bottle of hallucinogenics that I was selling at home. Now, anybody know what a lid of marijuana is? It's a baggie full of marijuana that you sell for a certain amount. Rolled up, ready to go. Right? I had all that at home. Here I am in church. Well, I had to get rid of all that when I got to the house. And guess where it went? Toilet. Big money, but it went in the toilet. These are decisions you make that solidify the decision you make. You with me? You don't just keep that there thinking, well, maybe. No. You got to get rid of this stuff. See? And so I was saved that particular moment. But there were a lot of things that weren't opened in my mind. My eyes didn't see them. But little by little, the Lord began to show me things that needed to change. And guess what? All these many decades later, I'm still seeing things that need to change. And watch this. All these many decades later, they startle me more today than they ever did. Because I can't believe that after all these many years in this journey, that these things are there and I didn't see them. Anybody with me? Can I be this honest and transparent? Now, I'm not talking about overwhelmingly sinful things, but what do I mean when I say overwhelmingly sinful things? Sin is sin. Sin is destructive. But you got to start with you and whittle it out. As you see, as the blindness is removed and as the Lord gives you insight, you got to attack that thing with all of your heart and do your best to put it under the blood so that you can keep advancing. So when a behavior becomes normalized and becomes visible, I'm going to push pause right there. We were talking at the very beginning this morning. I just want to come back to this because I think it's important. And as I look at you, I think, man, I need to deal with that. We were talking last night, and then we were talking again this morning. And here's a question that I think I've got to answer. When we talk about dialing it up, we talk about dialing it back. At what point do you realize, okay, this is who I am, and I need to be me? Right? Is that pretty well said? I just need to be me. I'm a I, I'm a low D, I'm a low C, and I'm a high S. So I just need to be me. I'm a 100 I. You know, we said this. I said, I can be the monkey swinging from a chandelier real quick. I like it, right? But that would irritate the heck out of somebody real quick, right? Dial it back, please. But at what point do you, listen, here's what I want to say to you. We focus on our strengths, not our weaknesses. Say that. Learn to be you. First and foremost, lean in to who you are. I would not be whatever semblance of success I am today if I weren't leaning in to who I am. It's that over-optimistic side of me, the high I, the trusting side of me, the believing that I can do it, that this stuff matters, that has enabled me to step out in faith and create all this stuff and not be worried to death about whether or not you'll like it. Can you see that? And just do it anyway. So I want to focus on my strength and lean into who I am with the caveat, with the full awareness that there are times, say there are times, when my behavior can annoy me. And I need to be sensitive to that fact. I have to always have my radar going and be thinking. This is emotional intelligence at its best. Emotional intelligence is two components, ladies and gentlemen. Number one, self-awareness. You are aware of how you're showing up. I'm showing up as Fred right now. This is what you see. But I have to be aware of the second component of emotional intelligence, which is this, and that is social awareness. Self-awareness, social awareness. Is the way that I'm showing up, does it fit my environment and my audience or the person or people that I am dealing with? You can get a lot of that by facial expressions and body language. But you've got to, 85% of communication is body language.
Yep.
If you learn to read the room, say it.
Read the room.
Read the room. You ever been in a meeting and it was you are very aware and everybody else, Bluetooth, you're connected in your brain. Remember the open loop system, we're all connected. Everybody in the room is aware that this person is out of touch and they just don't get that they're coming across in the wrong way. Right? You ever been in a room like that? And they don't get it? No emotional intelligence. No self-awareness. So, lean into who you are with dynamic tension of awareness that there may be times that doesn't fit. And at those times when you sense that, you'll get better at it as time goes. And here's the cool thing about being a Christian. I believe that the Paraclete lives he doesn't walk just with us, he's in us.
Yes.
And we can become sensitive to the Holy Spirit, and the Holy Spirit can help us with a certain amount of discernment that goes past what the corporate world has. And we can pick up on stuff, a frequency that says, dial it back. Oh, oops, I may be pushing it a little bit too much here. And you just have to experiment with that. Experience is the best teacher, and little by little. Listen to me. When the Holy Spirit is working with you, when I first got saved, the Holy Spirit, it's like a horse. Anybody ever rode a horse, or you've seen a Western, and a horse has a bridle, and the rider will pull back on the bridle to get the horse to stop, right? That's what the bridle's there for. It's that thing in his mouth that says, whoa! When you're first saved, that's the way the Holy Spirit has to do it. He almost has to pull the bit right out of your mouth. He has to pull you this way to get you to go here and get you to go there. And we make plenty of mistakes, right? Going and doing the wrong stuff. And then we find ourselves on our knees at night, somewhere crying and saying, Lord, I didn't mean to do that. When he says, yes, you did, just don't do it again. But here's what the Holy Spirit's trying to do. And with these tools and with this training, here's what he can do. He wants to neck rein you. That's a horse kind of a term. You got these two, you got the bridle and you got the reins. Those two leather things that you're holding, right? And one's on one side of the horse's neck, one's on the other. If you really have a horse under control and they've learned to follow you, you can take those reins. You don't have to pull back hard. You just barely pull, the horse stops. Or you lean those reins over on that neck and that horse goes this way. You lean them over here and it goes this way. The Holy Spirit wants to neck rein you. He don't want to have to pull those reins through your mouth and hurt you. He don't want to have to say, stop! He wants to say, go this way. Go that way. Don't do that. Don't say that. Don't look at that. Don't hang out with that person. Hang out with this person. Run with that person. Make this decision. Anybody hear me?
Amen.
And that can happen. So, I hope that helps just a little bit. When a behavior is normalized, it becomes invisible. Say it. When does it mean, what does it mean when the water you're swimming in is boiling? See, this becomes the problem. Remember, this whole illustration is about this. If you throw a frog into a boiling pot of water, it will jump right out. If you put yourself into a really bad situation, you find yourself in, you typically will back away. But what happens when you do it little by little by little by little by little? And you wake up one day and you're in a pot of boiling water, and your whole life is falling apart. See, dysfunctional behavior culminates in destruction. Healthy, functional behavior culminates in a life well lived. Let's take investing money for a moment. You should start putting money aside and preparing for your retirement right now. The younger you do it, the better off you're going to be.
Amen.
Because one day, you will wake up and 30 or 40 years will have passed. The 25th of May, Shirley and I celebrated 40 years. That tells you more about her than it does me. Good woman. Oh, by the way, let me answer this question. How many of you believe that I married that girl? Raise your hand. Come on now. Y'all buzzing on me. Everybody's got a vote. How many believe I married that girl? Raise your hand. Yeah. How many believe I did not marry that girl? How many of you still, after all these months, you won't raise your hand no matter what I ask? Y'all chickens, that's what you are. Okay, I'm asking again. How many believe I married the girl? Raise your hand.
Yeah.
How many believe I did not? Drum roll, please. I did not marry. She broke off. But God provided something better for me. Did I rebound from that all right? See, no, really, I got the lady that God intended for me to, absolutely no doubt. Would y'all please, her email is Shirley at LeaderLabs.com. Instagram her, tell her what I just said. It'll make up for all yesterday. I have no idea why I just told her. If you start investing, 40 years later, you wake up and you've got a whole set of things that are going right in your life. And you think, my Lord, how fast time flew. lives, right? But if you're not investing and you continually are making bad decisions, then you wake up 30, 40 years later and you're in the opposite situation. You're in a deficit instead of a positive. When's the best time to plant a tree? 40 years ago. Or right now. Right now. When do you start making functional decisions? I got good news and bad news. Good news is, or the bad news is, you where you are today because of the decisions you made. Good news is you where you are today because of the decisions you made. What's the moral of the story? Make different decisions.
Yep.
It's all about decisions. So get out of the pot of boiling water and get into something that is right. Now, I want you to hear this. Leaders can derail from any number of reasons, including inadequate feedback. Now, I want you to start thinking right now about what, and ask yourself, am I getting adequate feedback? Are people talking to me, or am I just surrounding myself with people doing que sera, sera stuff? You can always surround yourself with people that will tell you what you want to hear. Including inadequate feedback, unclear expectations. This has to do with vision. This has to do with futuristic thinking. This has to do with what are my expectations. What are your expectations for you? How good could you be if you started getting things in order? Insufficient investment in their own development and a lack of early detection. Early detecting the biases. Early detecting the routines and the habits that are undermining your best interest for you. You've got to fix some of that. But results from various leadership surveys suggest that more than half the leaders are performing under their potential. I think it's way below that. Most people are performing under their potential, ranging from steady but not optimal performance to them being at risk of termination or being fired. They don't even know it. It's becoming clear that early detection is the best cure. Early detection, say it. Early detection is the best cure. The need for objective assessment, I'm not going to read it all. You've got to have some way of getting feedback. That's why I say to you, if it's not the assessments that I have given you, find something like this. Start with behaviors, the behavioral analysis like the DISC. But find a good one. If it's not mine, it creates an opportunity for conversation. And we've got to have these conversations, so get some feedback. Because you, as a ministry leader especially, cannot afford to have blind spots. We're not going to deal with weaknesses unless we see that we find a blind spot. Then we want to try and deal with that. And here's what we know about leaders. Leaders who become the best version of themselves or anywhere near it have a passion. They have a passion for self-improvement. That's what I'm trying to ignite in each and every one of you. Some of you, it's going to work. You will never be the same after taking LeaderLabs. You will start changing for the better. I want to hear about it. I want you to talk to me. I want you to stay in contact with me. I want you to talk to me when you write your book, when you create your seminar, when you change your behavior. I want you to email me. I want you to text me. I want you to go online. I want you to find me, talk to me, give me that feedback. That fuels what I'm doing. It helps me to realize that I'm making a difference. When you do that, don't write me an epistle. just something short and sweet. But let me know, because that the testimony is something that's very, very important. The process of gaining greater insight is never ending. You will never arrive. When you're 80 or 90 years old, one of my giants is Dr. French Arrington. He'll turn 92 years old in July. He's the great theologian of the Church of God, probably the most prolific writer in the Church of God in terms of theology and doctrine, and a great Greek professor. I took Greek at Lee under him and then at the seminary under him, and we've become friends now. And 92 years old, still teaching at the seminary. We're going to put him in the Hall of Prophets, and you guys here in Pennsylvania helped us to be able to do that, to honor him and recognize him, so thank you. And I think to myself, I'm 64. Is it possible that at 92 I could still be doing what I'm doing? How many of you think that might be possible? Yeah. Leader Labs 104. We're just on Leader Labs 3.0 right now. How many of you still be my student then? We'll see, won't we? That means because we're all growing together. I'm just a curator of information. I'm out there trying to surf the ways of change and find the best stuff. So if you want the best stuff, at least in my opinion, stuff that works for me, then you want to stay with me. You want to hang on. So with that in mind, I want to show you something that I'm doing that just hot off the press. You're the first people to hear this because I'm just starting to get there. Coming the second Thursday in September, I'm starting something, and it's called Mind Mapping. And here's what it's going to be. It's Mind Mapping Master Classes. It's exclusively for Leader Lab graduates. If you want to be a part of this, you have to have graduated. We have almost 4,000 graduates now. And I think there's a portion of them, people have been asking me for stuff. And so I'm going to step out in faith and try to do this. It starts September this year, second Thursday, 8 p.m., cutting edge, thought-provoking ideas. I'm constantly finding stuff that I wish I had time to share with people. So 1 hour a month, the second Thursday of every month, online, and here's some more of the details of it. I'm going to brainstorm and mind map with you. I'm going to have a big whiteboard behind me. You'll be able to go online from wherever you are and sign in and be a part of it. And I'm going to be writing on the whiteboard, doing something I love to do. It's a fascinating type of teaching and training and thinking together, mind mapping, writing out my thoughts on the whiteboard. And then when we go into the Q&A time, writing down your ideas and throwing them up there as well. So it's going to be online on those Thursday nights at 8. You can come on and be online with us for an hour, and you'll be able to have the dialogue at the end. Once a month, 60 minutes, concluding with question and answer. It's going to be $12.95 a class, so you can sign in and go online to my website and do that. Or for $120 a year, it's $10 a class. You can do the $120 and you can sign in. You can watch it anytime you want, or you can come in online. I believe that people are going to eat this up, and I'm looking forward to having a continual cohort of people that are staying with me and being involved. And this is going to be the very first of some cool things. Certificate with the completion of the first 12 master classes. And then I'm hopefully going to continue that. There'll be some other things that you will have. And so every Thursday, second Thursday at 8, you'll be able to come on so you can plan wherever you are. But if you miss it live, then you can go on at any time and you'll be able to catch up. And look at this, the first one is going to be free. So you, as a graduate, you get to come on the first Thursday in September, second Thursday in September, and you get to try it out, test drive it. How's that? And here's what we're going to do with these. It's going to be a very interesting concept that I'm going to try out. We often find that participants in leadership development programs find themselves overwhelmed by the sheer amount of information. Therefore, a lot of great ideas get lost because, and you know me, I push out so much stuff at one time, but here's what we're going to do. We're going to experiment with a back and forth approach with the first master class in September. We'll engage the ideas and concepts, and then the second month, we're going to totally involve what we call sense-making dialogue. There's going to be nothing but Q&A from the field. As you talk to me, I'm still going to be in front of my whiteboard, but as you talk and share your ideas, I'm going to be writing them and bouncing back and forth. That makes sense? And so every 2 months, So I think what's going to be a cool thing about this too is that you can get your teams involved, because a lot of you had your teams to do this. I'm going to be looking at some of the most cutting edge ideas and thoughts that are relevant, that are out there on the field, and bringing them to you every month. So I hope that you'll do that. Now, how can you get involved? This is my website, and if you look down at the bottom, you need to subscribe. If you're not receiving my updates, down at the very bottom of the page down here, it says subscribe to receive. Make sure you do that to make sure that you're getting. I don't inundate you with stuff, but I'll be talking to you about this over the next couple of months. So make sure that you do that. All right? Now, we need to take a break. We're going to take a break, and then we're going to come back and we're going to look real quick at your team stuff from last night, just 3 slides to overview that, and then we're jumping into the sabotage stuff, and we're going to dive deep. You ready? Okay, take 10 minutes and come back. Man, everybody, it must be a nice day out there. Somebody look at those outside and say, come on back in here. He's about to talk to you. Evie, tell them to come in that I'm about to talk to them. Okay, here's what I want to do. I want to give you a number of the traits that we're going to talk about that derail. I'm going to give them to you right up front. And then I'm going to come back after lunch and unpack each one of them a little more in depth, okay? But I want to give you a snapshot of where we're going to be going over the first little bit here. Now, I want to say right now, some of these are going to surprise you. These are not my ideas. What I've done again, curated the information from the research. What are the top 7, 8, 10 derailers that are typical fatal flaws in people's lives that derail them, that undermine their best efforts at becoming the best version of themselves? So I've found those. And then I have a couple bonus ideas, and then I have another 5 ideas. So it just depends on how far we get. So I'm going to try to get through all of them before we graduate today. And I think we might be able to do that. But I want to give them to you right up front, the traits that derail. And I'll show you when I finish with this slide so that you can take it all at once. Here's the first one. A failure to attend to tasks and interpersonal details. There are people out there that pour out of the relationship bucket so much that that's their norm. And they don't get to task-oriented things enough. It's the interpersonal details that kind of mess them up, right? So you've got to learn to be balanced one way or the other. But you've got to balance this thing and say, results, say results. You got to have some results. Even in your church, what are the results? Where's the fruit that you've got there? Number 2, a failure to identify identify problems and then deal with them. That's a two-part statement. Number one, there are too many people that I don't know if they don't see them or they just don't want to see them. But they do not identify problems. They don't recognize them when they're there. And then when they do see the problem, they don't deal with it. This is called avoidance of conflict. And I'm letting that sink in. Because you have to eat that ugly frog. Does that communicate? Number 3, failure to communicate with clarity. Again, 2 parts, failure to communicate. And you have not communicated if people don't understand you. Just talking don't get it. You have to communicate with clarity. Make it clear. We're going to talk about what does that look like. How do we do this? A failure to build and mend relationships, up, down, across, internally, and externally. Now in the church, the internally is not, well, it's still a problem. Because all we do is shuffle in and out of a church building and we don't have relationships. Do you hear what I just said?
Yeah.
We live in a time, talk about Issachar leadership, understanding the times. We live in a time when people are more isolated and alone, experiencing loneliness more than any other generation of all time. There are people in this room who feel isolated and lonely. And yet they're a part of the church. The church is uniquely designed to deal with that problem. If we came to ourselves and realized how to develop relationships. Internally first, but then if we're going to be the missional people that God has called us to be, which there shouldn't be even a question. As the Father sent me, so send I you. Seek and save the lost. I'm not asking the Father to take you out of the world. I'm asking Him to keep you from the evil one that's in the world. Right? He needs us in the world. So that's the external part. And most churches don't have any friends outside the church. They're the enemy, so we want to keep them out. Ouch. God help that a Democrat shows up at church. Okay, I'm going to turn it around. God help the Republican shows up. See how we get this? It's almost as if our theology is interpreted downstream from our politics.
Come on now.
But whether you're a Democrat or a Republican, we're a Christian.
Yeah.
And here's the truth. Here's what I found out. No matter what my personal belief is or political persuasion, when I'm out talking with people and hanging out with people, doing what I'm doing, and that stuff don't come up, I find that I have a whole lot more in common with people than I think I do. When I find out later on that they're a Democrat or a Republican, regardless of what I am, I say, my Lord, I had 90% that we had in common. Why in the world did I want to bring that mess up?
Exactly.
Anybody with me?
Yes.
I mean, that's important, obviously, but there's other stuff. We have a whole lot more in common if we could sidestep some of that mess. We might be able to work through some of that mess if we dealt with what we have in common. Number 5, a failure to identify, recruit, and develop team members. This is huge. Identify, recruit, and develop team members. You find some people, now that you've got the DISC kind of training, you know, the behavioral profile training, you ought to be able to pretty much recognize a D when you see them, an I when you see them, an S when you see them, a C when you see them, and know what seat those kind of people need to have on your bus. And if you go a little bit deeper, you can actually figure out where your deficits are. Where do you need more of certain people in the church? Because diversity is where we get our strength in the church. That's what 1 Corinthians 12 says. We'll never be the strong church that we're supposed to be unless we are multicultural churches. And that's a mouthful right there. And I know that some people in certain contexts don't have as many multicultural demographics as others, but listen, it still should be, we should strive to be representative of the community around our church. And the church should be known by the community around the church. Quarter-mile radius. Remember, take your church, put it on a map, put a quarter-mile or half-mile around it, and then make it your goal to make sure that every person that's located within that circle knows who you are and that you're there for them. Don't ever let it be said when asked about your church and your community, when someone says, what do you think about such and such church? Don't ever let them say, what church? They should know your church. And they should know it for a whole lot more than the conflict that's in it. That's been too much of a problem, right?
Yep.
Identify, recruit, and then develop. Say develop. Develop team members. Number 6, failure due to bullying, abrasive behavior that interferes with your leadership effectiveness. Now, this goes back to what we were talking about just a few minutes ago, but these are those exceptions. You lean into who you are because that's your strength. But if there is some type of abrasive behavior that you've got in your life, it's undermining your best interest. You have to figure that out. Where am I being abrasive? The overwhelming majority of people don't intend that, I'm convinced. Because they want to be successful, they want to be effective, they want to be promoted, they want to make a good living, they have families and so on and so forth. They have just normalized a dysfunctional behavior and it has become invisible to them. Are y'all with me? And God forbid that might be you or me. So we have to be able to see what that is, or it undermines us. Number 7, a failure to be aware of the need for competency development. We'll get there a little bit later, but we should all, every person, be aware that we could be better than we are. Competency development. Competency is skills. There are skills. We know that we can learn these things. They can be taught, we can learn them. There's lots of resources. One of the best resources that I find for me are TED Talks. I love TED Talks. Get off Netflix and Prime Video, start watching TED Talks a little bit more. Now I'm meddling, aren't I? And I like Netflix and Prime Video probably as much as all of you, because I'm a movie guy. I just love that kind of stuff. But yet you got to be balanced with it. There's entertainment, and then and escapism, and then there's development. So find some stuff that you know you need to grow. And there's lots of blogs and podcasts and things that are out there that you can do your own self-development. And you can help yourself. Competency development is huge. Number 8, a failure to be aware of how you use your emotions. Loss of composure and emotional stability. This is not easy to see, by the way, if it's you. Now, that is so good that I'm going to say it again. A loss of composure and emotional stability is not easy to see if it's you. There has to be something that, like cold water that hits you in the face, some experience that causes an epiphany for you to see a dysfunctional behavior that you've normalized. And I've had those experiences in my life, a couple of them just recently. Usually that experience happens with somebody that you're close to. Usually it happens with real good friends or especially with family members, where something happens and someone finally gets enough confidence to confront you over something and to say, do you not realize that hurts? Or do you realize what you're saying or doing? And you have to disconnect the internal lawyer that you set up your whole life that argues the point that all of your behavior is right and everybody else's behavior is wrong. Now, you hear me on that one? Every one of us have hired an internal personal lawyer. He or she is in there talking to you all the time, saying, this is good, this is good, this is good. That might not be so good. Problem is that he or she don't talk to us about the not so good very often. And sometimes when a good family member or a trusted friend gives you some feedback, you might have to tell the lawyer to go take a coffee break. Are you hearing me? Just consider it. That's all I'm asking. It might be one of the best things you ever did. Is just open yourself up. Hold out the assumption in front of you that they might be right and you might be wrong. Fix it. And then it's usually not a silver bullet or something that you can do in that moment. But awareness is curative. Say that.
Awareness is curative.
Once you see it, you can't unsee it. And once you see it, you start working on it. Okay? Number 9, a failure to read the room. We've been talking a little bit about this. A failure to read the room or the emotional frequency of others, the dynamics of situations and relationships. These are all things that can derail you. These are the top things, according to the literature and the research that's out there, that literally derail people. Fatal flaws that people allow become normalized, and they become invisible to them and they don't see them, which means that other people do. Number 10, a failure to establish mentoring and coaching relationships with people you admire and respect, that you believe you could learn from. Now this is powerful. And this again is up and down. Do you notice this? Mentoring and coaching relationships. We'll get into it a little bit deeper after lunch, but who's mentoring you? And again, people can be mentoring and coaching you and you don't have a personal relationship with them. This is the reason why I'm going to start the master classes in September. 1 hour a month. And it's going to be a lot of work on me because I have to put in the work to be ready for those, right? To find the right stuff. Yet at the same time, there's so many people out there that I want to be a coach and a mentor for, and I'm trying to say, what vehicle can I use to do this? And so I can be a mentor and a coach to you in a group way where I wouldn't be able to be that in an individual way. And I'm just giving you an example. There's plenty of people out there. What authors do you like to read? What podcasts do you like to listen to? Find those people. Find those people and dig into it. Tim Ferriss. I don't know if you've ever heard of him. Tim Ferriss is one of my people that I listen to on a constant basis. Now, he's a little out there or something, but he's a curator of information. And I just, that's like eating catfish. Anybody like catfish? Well, catfish have bones. And you have to throw the bones out. That don't stop you from eating catfish. So he'll say some things sometimes that I don't agree with or whatever, but I like being exposed to ideas and pulling them through the biblical filter. And if you're like that, then people like that, people that can be mentoring you and coaching you. Now let's flip that. This is the important. That's first. Because you can't help anybody if you're not learning, growing. You can't help anyone if your own life's mess, right? But then let's flip that. Who are you helping? Who are you intentionally helping? I've got 3 guys and a lady that live in Cleveland, Tennessee, and there's several more that I'm mentoring and coaching personally. And it's because of a geographical situation. They're right there in Cleveland where I can say, you know, and the lady's the wife of one of the men, so you have to be careful about those situations. Everybody hear what I'm saying? So they're within that area, so we can say, let's go to lunch, let's go to coffee, let's, you know, that kind of thing. Well, we were doing labs in Alabama, 3.0 in Alabama, and I wanted them to be able to see the way I do things. They're getting involved in training for trainer. And so I invited them to ride with me or meet me in Alabama for those labs. Now, all you can do is invite people in, right? When you're coaching and mentoring. You have to earn the right to do that. Sometimes it may even seem a little bit egotistical, right? I can remember back years ago, I was pastoring in Oak Ridge, Tennessee, and I went to a guy, some of you would know him if I mentioned him in the room. But I went to him, he was at the seminary too, and I was driving in on Thursdays at that point for my master's in divinity degree. And I thought to myself, I think I could help this guy. And so I went to him, took him to lunch, I paid for the lunch, and I said, listen, when you get ready to do your internship, why don't you do it with me up in Oak Ridge? And I said, I'd really like to take you under my wing and kind of just pour into you. It was one of the first times I realized that sounds a little weird sometimes to somebody. And can you get it? And it's like one of those things I just did, and then I got to thinking, oh boy, that didn't come off the way I intended it, because he was looking at me like, who does this guy think he is, you know? It was a year and a half later that the same guy came to me and said, can we go to lunch this time, Bob? And I said, yeah. And he said, a year and a half ago, I had no clue who you were or what you were saying to me. He said, but can I take you up on that now? I said, sure. 20-something years later, we're great friends and colleagues. Who have you chosen? Who do you see out there that has potential? And you will seriously look at them and say, I could help them. And you choose them. And you pour into them. I really believe this is super leadership at its best. In my book, Lucky Number 8, I'll list some of those people that poured into me. If it weren't for them, I would not be the person that I am today. And each one of those people helped fashion me and shape me. And that's what you need to be to somebody. So who's mentoring you? Who's pouring into you? And who are you pouring into? Okay, I'm going to pause there and let's take some questions. And let's deal with some of this stuff. Right now, we're waiting on lunch. Once lunch comes, we'll pause and we'll be ready to go. So talk to me. It can be about this stuff, anything that we talked about this morning. Try to keep it as focused as possible. Yes.
When you're looking for someone, who you feel like, okay, I can mentor this person or coach them, are you looking for someone who is looking that they are intentionally trying themselves, or are you looking for someone who's lost?
What do you mean by lost? Are you talking about not saved? Or are you talking about they're just kind of floundering and they're
They're kind of floundering, not really looking for someone, but you know that they need someone to guide them.
My first rule of thumb, and it's just mine, and I've got good friends that coach and mentor, and they go about it a different way. But if you're looking at your trimetrics DNA, when you talk about driving forces, the motivators, there are one of the motivators in your driving forces. You have to decide which one you are. Let's just do this little exercise and let's find out which one you are in terms of driving forces. There are those people when they're going to help somebody, coach, mentor, or even help somebody who they just are altruistic. And that's the driver in the Tri-Mentor's DNA. It's altruistic. And you just help people. You don't care, man. If you see somebody who's lost or floundering and you can get to them, you're going to help them, right? Now, the other side of that driver is the person who says, I don't just help anybody and everybody. I care about people, but I want people to have skin in the game. If they're going to help themselves, I don't want to waste my time. I want them to have skin in the game and I'll help them. Okay, I want to know which one of those you are. And if you look at your Tri-Mentor's DNA, you'll actually see that it helps you to see that. But right now, let's just take a hand. If you're the person that's altruistic, you will just help people regardless. Raise your hand. Okay? How about the other side of that coin? You say, I'll help them if they got skin in the game. If they put skin in the game. I'm not just going to help them. All right? How many of you don't care? A couple of you are honest. You're actually a Christian. Maybe. But you see the difference. Okay, so it depends. Isn't it crazy that we're made up like that? I'm the skin in the game guy. I love people. I believe I'm altruistic. In other words, I've got compassion and mercy because I know where I've come from. But I've also learned from experience that I could waste my time a lot if people don't want to get involved. They have to make choices. And they have to get involved. So I'm the one that has skin in the game. So if they're floundering and I see them floundering, that's, of course, I want to help them. So I go after them, but then I look to see if they're going to commit. You with me? So are they going to commit? Because, listen, you can't coach and mentor everybody. Coaching and mentoring is taking things to a deeper level. Unless you do it like I'm trying to create a platform with master classes where I can do that, but that's going to be still a kind of a superficial level. I can't know everybody at a deep level. But there are some that I'm with, and that's why I said to them, hey, go with me to Alabama. So they're with me in a car. You have to kind of like these people too. Right? You see what I'm saying? If they get on your nerves, you probably don't want to mentor and coach them. Because that's going to come out unless you're really good at self-control. So you're picking them. Now, some people will try and pick you. And that's where you just have to dial it up or dial it back and say, I don't have time. I just don't have time, or let's explore that, or that kind of thing. But I like to think that they've got skin in the game and that they've made a choice to stay with me. So I say to them, hey, won't you meet me in Alabama? So the first time they drove the 3 hours to meet me in Birmingham. Well, that spoke to me, right? When 4 people show up to do this. And I'll work it out with Brother Hart and say, I've got 4 people I'm mentoring. But what else does that say to the other 50, 60 people that's showing up at LeaderLabs 3.0 in Alabama? And I introduce these 4 people and I say, they're from Cleveland and they're people that I'm mentoring. What have I just done to the people in Alabama?
Modeled the way.
Modeled the way. Say modeled the way. When leaders are at their extraordinary best, they're serving as an example, they're doing the things that they tell other people to do, and they're doing it intentionally. I want the people in my labs, when they can, to see me coaching and mentoring. Then those same people come to me and they say, can we ride with you? Yeah, you drive and I'll sit over here and drink coffee. So now I've got a win-win, right? So they're driving happily and we're getting to talk 6 hours on the way back and forth. So I've got kind of a captive audience. But they are loving it. because they're getting time with me, and I'm loving it because I'm getting time with them, because I see potential in them. Does that answer it? Somebody else? Okay. You have a two-part question. Well, this is only a one-part question session. I'm kidding. You just look like you kind of looks like an idiot. So let's start with the first one, then we'll come back to second.
One of the things you always mention that feedback is a gift, and I notice that the customer focus is number 17 on the Church of God benchmark. And my question is, do we have, as a church, have a pulse on the customer voice of the customer? Do we have a pulse on the voice of the customer? And what are we doing to keep the customer in mind as we go? And the customer is the people. So if that's number 7, so what are we doing to strategically put the voice of the customer in mind as we build? Are we doing intentional things like focus groups, surveys, listening? Are we intentionally doing those things to build up the customer, the voice of the customer?
That's a great question. And I like the way you made the connection. You connected the dots, right? Sometimes we'll use a corporate tool like this one, and because the terminology don't fit our spiritual terminology, it's like, I ain't gonna use that. That's corporate. Well, it was a heathen priest that went to Moses and gave him advice that helped him to lead the children of Israel. Remember? He said, you're wearing yourself out. You got to learn to delegate because you're trying to lead all by yourself, right? So there's lots of things that we can learn. And to see something that says, well, what do you mean by customer? Well, do we have customers in the church?
Yeah.
Please somebody say yes. Yes. I've even toyed with the fact of asking everybody in Leader Labs to start calling church members customers. And here's the primary reason. And I've had some pastors give me pushback saying, I ain't calling them customers. I'm not here to satisfy them. And I want to say, no, that's a bad attitude. Because in a way you are here. All right, let's change that. Let's flip that a little bit. You're not here to satisfy them. There's another word that starts with S. You're here to what?
Serve.
Serve them. Completely and totally. You know how the Gentiles lead? They exercise authority over you. They lord it over you. But not so with you. If you want to be first and if you want to be great, you must serve. We might be better servants if we looked at people as being customers. How should I serve them? And the higher position you have in the church or any organization, the more of a servant you should be.
Yes.
Listen to what Jesus said. Even as the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve, and to lay down my life. And we've tried, anyhow, customers are there. We should have a customer focus. Who's our number one customers? People outside the church. Seek and save that which is lost. How many of you have 100 inside your church? You got 99 people that's there with you, worshiping and having a good time, paying tithes every Sunday. But there's one person in your community that don't know Jesus. Jesus used this illustration to give us a priority.
Yes.
How many of you would not leave the 90 and 9 and go find that one, the priority of the lost? That's my number one customer. So what is my church doing to get outside the four walls and to be the light, to be the city set on the hill, to be the one that is touching the world, ministering to my customers, serving them? So should it be higher? I think it's got to be. But leadership, again, to go back to what Bishop Cooper was talking about, for me, there is no leadership in the church without it being Matthew 20:20 leadership. Servant leadership. Not so with you leadership. It's servant. And to be a servant, I have to know how to serve customers. So you got into all this strategy, right? What am I not doing this? What am I not doing surveys? What am I not doing that? What am I not doing? I think that's a brilliant question. I think if we were really serious about being missional and not just maintenance minded, I believe there's some of the things we would be doing. You can't execute if you don't know what to execute on. If you don't know who's in your community, you don't know how to reach them. And if you don't have a strategy, then you're not going to reach them. And if your life is not halfway structured and orderly, you can't reach them because you're a mess. So how are you going to help them? Does that help at all? Well, now, point number 2, because I see food. How much longer do I have? We're ready. We'll come back to you after lunch, okay? All right, come get this thing, Josh, because I heard that Chick-fil-A is really good when it's hot. Thank you, Josh. Solomon, where's Solomon? Solomon, stand up. Solomon asked a question over lunch. Great question. So I'd like to engage that question real quick before we jump into this. So thank you for asking this question. And let me just state it this way. I said, giving up is not an option. Say that out loud. Most of us in this room have thought about it in recent days. And more in ministry, more and more ministers are considering it. Because ministry is tough. But giving up is not an option. But I need to qualify that. This is what Solomon brought to my attention. Transition is not giving up. There comes a time for a transition in ministry. And I use the rubber band thing. I'm encouraging you to stay long term, to try and stay somewhere. Because with longevity comes effectiveness. You earn the right to speak into people's lives. And common sense tells you that the longer you're there, the more of a pastoral influence, pastoral leadership influence you'll have. So we want to try and stay. But there comes a time when it's time to leave. It's even the Lord's will. We have to just be careful that we don't throw those terms around. Because once you say it's God's will for me to leave, you just threw down the trump card. Do you get that? Somebody comes to you and says, well, it's God told me to do such and such. I don't even have anything else to say to that. The conversation's done. Who can argue with that? Who can counsel against that? God told me. That's a pretty big statement. So be careful about throwing the God talk around. You could have just ate too much pizza last night. You had too much hot sauce. Right? And it does damage to your credibility huge when you have to back up on the God talk. So be careful. But I told Solomon there's been 3 times in my life where I know that it was the Lord's will for me to transition. 30 years as a pastor, and then I transitioned to missionary work, 11 years in Southeast Asia. And watch this. When I left pastoring, there were actually, because I was taking a different approach. It was innovative. World Missions wanted to fly under the radar to get into Southeast Asia, to those countries that were Buddhist and Hindu, where there was no church presence. So I was going to be over a non-government organization, People for Care and Learning. And people heard that and they said, well, Fred's leaving the ministry. What are you going to do now that you're leaving the ministry? I wasn't leaving the ministry. I was transitioning to a different ministry. And I felt like I really did feel like it was the Lord's will, but it wasn't just me. Let everything be confirmed in the mouth of 2 or 3 witnesses. There's wisdom in the multitude of counsel, right? And so I was looking for the right time. And the Lord had been dealing with me over a period of time. So I thought that that was a transition. I had also been working with the church where I was at to transition then. Actually, my associate pastor, Dr. Paul Mettler, became the new pastor after going through the Church of God process. But he had been there with me for 5 years. It was the natural choice, but they went through the process and he became the pastor. So it was about transitioning that church and me moving on to a missionary assignment. And then after 11 years of working in Southeast Asia and being the superintendent of Southeast Asia for the Churches of God, it became time, I felt, for me to step away from that to do this full time. Now, I had been doing leadership development and teaching stuff for years, 2 decades, honing it, working on this stuff. But then I felt like, and listen, in all of these, I'm taking a very short period of time to get a point across to you. And this is what Solomon and I were talking about. There were a lot of things that supplemented my decision to make the change. It wasn't just an overnight decision. I'm talking months, years of beginning to see that I felt, and feeling's not even a good, I believed the Lord was transitioning me. And so I took time. And in each time it was a step of faith, because going to Southeast Asia, I had no budget. 30-something years, you work yourself up in the Church of God where you've got a comfortable salary, you've got a comfortable benefit package, your church is doing well, you don't have to leave, and then you're going to step into something where there is no salary. You get a salary, the board sets your salary, but you have to raise it all. What a deal I have with you, right? But the Lord was good, and we stepped away. That was a transition. Then, 11 years later, you work yourself up to where you're secure again, and then you feel like the Lord asked you to step away from all that security again. And for a guy whose insecurity is your number one problem, does that surprise anybody? Insecurity is my number one issue. Now you know as Paul Harvey used to say, the first part of the story. You can also, I think, begin to put that together psychologically, right? As a little young boy, 9 years old, and your sister's shot to death in the front yard, your mother dies 6 months later of cancer, and then all of a sudden you're by yourself because my other brothers and sisters were married and gone. My whole world fell apart. I don't even remember 4th and 5th grade years. Don't remember nothing about it. And so insecurity is still with me. But listen, insecurity is with a lot of you. The reason why you haven't stepped out to do what you know you should be doing is because of insecurities. You're afraid. So a great question for you. Ready? What would you do if you weren't afraid? And in my situation, twice, it was I would step away from what I'm doing and take a leap of faith and do something that I feel like I'm supposed to be doing. But I didn't do that arbitrarily. I didn't do that overnight. Because that's a big step. Please don't anybody go home and quit your church.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. So says the bishop. Please. Don't have wholesale phone calls on Monday morning. What in the world? So transition is not giving up. Transition can actually be going deep. So it can be God's plan for you. God promotes. And not every transition is giving up. You just have to know inside your own heart of hearts, am I giving up? But watch, you don't have to leave to give up. And this is the problem in the church right now. When I say we have too many managers, not enough leaders, we have managers not even doing a whole lot of managing. They gave up. Todd Bolsinger Bolsinger said it's because Todd Bolsinger said it one way, and then the Jewish rabbi said it the other way, Friedman. He said failure of nerve and failure of heart are the two reasons why pastors and people in the ministry are walking away from the ministry. Failure of nerve and failure of heart. Failure of nerve is you stay in your position, but you stop being a leader. You stop challenging the status quo because it hurts too much to face the resistance. So you just say, I'm just going to go back up into the cheap seats and just manage this thing. They don't know what I'm doing anyway. They think I'm in prayer and fasting all the time. So I'll just let them think that, just draw salad. You see what I'm saying, though? Failure of nerve or failure of heart. And failure of heart is quitting, actually quitting and walking away from the ministry. And by the droves, by the thousands, 15,000 a month in some statistics are walking away from the ministry never to return. That's pretty bad, ladies and gentlemen. They'd rather go work at the door at Walmart. Some of you know what I'm talking about. It's tough. Burnout's the number one problem. They call it the canary in the mine shaft, even in the ministry. And burnout's one of those crazy things. You can be right on the tip end of it and not even know it. I was there when I left People for Care and Learning and had worked in Southeast Asia 11 years and made 54 trips back and forth, carrying over 3,000 people back and forth to Asia with me. Working so hard, burning the candle at both ends, that you don't know you're at the edge of burnout until you step away, and then all of a sudden, a couple months later, it dawns on you. You have to slow down to even know that you're on the edge of burnout. Transition is not giving up, Solomon. But you have to make sure that I'm transitioning to the right things for the right reason.
Yes.
Do not do it because you're giving up. But if you're about to burn out, get help. You got great people that care about you, that love you. Reach out, be open, be honest. Sometimes it's just about taking a short sabbatical. Sometimes it's about incremental short sabbaticals to where you can pull back and they can help you get some help. Just don't give up. Does that help, Solomon? Okay, let's give Solomon a hand. That was a really good question. All right, let's jump into these and let's move as fast as we can. These are the same 10, and then I've got some bonus ones that I want to deal with. And I'm going to go rapid fire through these, just unpacking them a little bit more. Failure to attend a task and interpersonal leadership. Now remember, these are the top 10. And at the end, somebody has asked me, JJ, which one of these that I would choose as the number one, right? So remember to get to that. I have never thought about that. So I'm going to have to think about it as I'm going through this and see if I have an opinion on it. It might be one of my bonus ones that I picked, but we'll see. Failure to attend a task in interpersonal relationship. Research says these are the things that could trip you up, that could be undermining your own success and would derail you over a period of time. So everybody pours out of either a task bucket or a relationship bucket. All leaders do, and we have the propensity to do that. When we talk about the task bucket, it means you have to eat your ugly frog. Say it out loud. You got to. This is your plan, ladies and gentlemen. You got to have a plan. If you guys will do some of this stuff, your lives will be revolutionized. You know, I have people saying, I've had good friends say to me, how in the world are you doing what you're doing? And I said, because while you're doing all this other frivolous stuff, I'm busy doing all this stuff. Does that make sense? It's about how you use your time. Focus, 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 and start doing the things that God's called you to do, and stop spending time doing some of the frivolous things you do. You start focusing, but you have to eat your ugly frogs. You got to take care of the details, you got to take care of responsibilities. Then on the other side, it has to do with the relationship bucket. Relationships are important. And the problem is, some of you don't believe that. Because you are the task person. And you're the person that says, I don't like water cooler people because they're always talking and not getting anything done. And the water cooler person who believes in the relationship bucket say, well, relationships are important too. And it's not an either or. You have to learn to pour out of both buckets. And you have to look and say, what's my propensity? If my propensity is to pour out the relationship bucket like I am, then I have to do things to be task-oriented. I was talking, I think, was it last night that I was talking about how I had to hire the statisticians that helped me with my PhD. Because I knew that I wasn't a task-oriented person. That was early on, 20 years ago, when I started to figure this out. I'm not a numbers person, I'm not a task person, I'm not a statistical person, so I had to hire them. And through this journey of learning to be task-oriented, I had to reach out and find people to help me do that. And then on the other hand, if you're not a relationship person, that's where you have to dial that up. You have to get yourself out of that chair, out of that office, and go outside and talk to people every once in a while. You have to make yourself. That's discipline. Because relationships are important. And advancements, promotions, transitions, all this stuff happens about relationships. The problem with that one is, if you don't realize how important relationships and or task is, things will get left undone. And over a period, not one of these things is going to hurt you at the moment. Any one of these things in the moment, you'll jump out of the pot because it's hot. You see it. It's when it happens over time, months, years, and that becomes normalized and it becomes invisible to you. Listen, I'm going to go ahead and tell you one of the number one things I see right now. And it has to do with this one. Number one, JJ. I'm dealing with pastors and with people in ministry everywhere. Irresponsibility is at an epidemic proportion. Irresponsibility blows my mind. And from the sound of it, it's probably convicting a lot of people in the room. We're just irresponsible. We just don't take care of our MITs, most important task, every day, every day, every day, every day, every day. Somebody say it.
Every day.
You can't get away from it. What can I do to be the mature person I'm supposed to be? Eat your ugly frogs and take care of your most important task every day. Because the bias of nature is always toward the wilderness, never toward the fruitful field. Weeds will continue to grow. You have to pull those weeds out of your life every day. Pay every bill every month. Do your laundry every week. Make your bed every morning. Reset the room every bill. Do your report every month. Listen, I have an email that pops up in my Google Calendar. It pops up. You can do this. It pops up the first day of every month. Do your Church of God report. And I do not delete that until I go right there and do my Church of God report. Remind yourself to do some of these little simple things. But that could be, and I can come back to that later, could be my number one thing. I'm dealing with people all the time. And I ask them, it boils down to return a text, for heaven's sake.
Come on now. Come on now. Say one more game.
Return a text, for heaven's sake. Return an email, for heaven's sakes. Are you ready for this? I can look at your emails that you have not answered, and I can categorize them according to the way you value the people that wrote emails to you. If you don't return an email, you don't value the person.
No.
Because if you value them, you will immediately, you'll figure out a way to get that and return that email. I know this. You know this. This is why you have to have a plan. You have to have a structure. You have to have an order. People, you know, Atomic Habits said,
Atomic habits.
order that book yesterday. Get it and read it and get the best practices of people about how they're doing things, how they control this stuff. You can't do your email constantly. Don't do that. You set times of the day where you do your email, and then you discipline yourself not to go there. Your cell phone is not an appendage to your body. Notifications should not just be constantly attacking you all the time. You can even turn them off. I respect somebody when I text them or I email them and I get a notification that says notifications are on.
Yes.
I say, that's pretty cool. Why? They're focusing on something else. But they'll get back to you. Because if they've got notifications on, that tells me they're responsible enough to focus on something, so they'll probably be responsible enough to get back to me when they take the notification off. Okay, let's move on. Number 2, failure to identify problems and deal with them. First of all, the failure to identify a problem. See the problems. And then when you see the problem, eat that ugly frog. Deal with it. This goes, JJ, to really part 2 of the first problem. Irresponsibility and then failure to deal with problems. I would rather a person tell me they don't like me or they're not interested than to just ignore me. Now, there's always, and I get convicted over this because I've got an email sitting in my inbox with you right now. So it depends. There's always an exception to a rule, but on a whole, we haven't talked about that. So my conviction is at least being dealt with a little bit. So now I'm going to have to go back and really work on it. We have to have a structure that says this is the way that we're trying to deal with all this. And still there'll be things that creep through, things that sneak through, but it should not become a whole inbox full of stuff. And I'm using the inbox as an example. There's lots of other things that could be there as well. You've got to have a plan, and you've got to work that plan every day, every day, every day, every day, every day. And I know that's frustrating, right? But this is life. You got to deal with it. So find the problem, find the issue that you're trying, that you keep avoiding, and then you've got to find that and get a solution to it. And this is the thing, this is the problem with that, isn't it? Is because sometimes with any problem, there's more than one decision that can be made. And we want to know which one. And how many of us know that there's some of us that just can't make a decision? You ever met somebody that just can't make a decision? And usually if you're that kind of person, it's about everything. Decision making is just tough for you. I know a person that when we go to a restaurant, I say, I'm going to order for you. Because you will not be able to make a decision. And whatever I order, you're going to want that anyway. So I'm just going to go ahead and order. And they say, no, I'm going to order. I'm going to figure something out. So they say, okay, I'm going to figure something out. And they figure it out. And then I just go ahead and know in my heart that I'm going to eat what they're ordering because they're going to eat what I order. You don't know who this is, but trying to figure it out. But you got to make decisions, right? Stop being afraid. Say it out loud. You just got to step out there and make a decision, for heaven's sake. Eat that hamburger. You know? Go ahead and order the quiche or the grilled fish or whatever. Order. Are you a courageous leader? And this is what we have to do. We have to be courageous leaders. Let me give you 7 traits of a courageous leader, because this is where you have to get out of the cheap seats and you have to lead. And the first thing you have to lead is yourself, right? So you got to lead you. Number 1, a courageous leader remains in the arena when things get difficult. They do not go to the cheap seats. They see a little bit of blood, they don't run. And it's your blood. you got to stay there. Number 2, courageous leaders are not afraid to make big requests of others, but willing to pull their equal weight to accomplish them. When you say there's a work day at the church, you show up at the work day. And you don't sit on the stairs watching everybody else or run the video. You be the first one pushing the wheelbarrow, digging the holes, mowing the grass. You model the way. You got to be the person that's out there. You got to make big requests of them. Sometimes we make big requests of our people. We don't understand why nobody shows up. It's because they've watched you not show up long enough. Or when you do show up, you let them do it. This is a great opportunity for you to show that you are a servant. You'll be there working when they start, and you'll be there working when they leave. You model the way. Number 3, courageous leaders are willing to take the first move into uncharted territory, pursuing the unproven by willingly taking risks. Walter, we were talking about this a little bit earlier. This is a perfect example of some of the stuff you and I were talking about, right? Change is harder for some of us than it is for others. But you've got to realize that in this day and time, change is here. We've got to change. It's just what has to change. That's the hard part. What are the bones of Joseph that we're going to take into the future with us? We got to think, and we got to do it together. Number 4, courageous leaders move forward by faith even when the outcome is unclear. But this is leadership, for heaven's sake. If you're going to wait until you've got complete clarity on the outcome, you will never lead. Are you with me?
Yes.
Part of leadership is that you're going somewhere, you're pulling that rubber band, and there's tension, and you're hoping and praying it don't snap on. The opposite of that is armchair quarterback. That's Monday morning quarterback. It's real easy for everybody to set up the seats or after the fact to criticize what you were doing. But they weren't doing anything. So if I'm going to get criticized for something, I'll get criticized for my failure. But at least I was in the arena doing something. Right? I was daring greatly, as Roosevelt said. So get out there and do something. Number 5, courageous leaders make hard decisions regarding people, trusting responsibilities to others early and acknowledging when a team member is no longer a good fit for the team. That's one of the toughest things that a leader ever does, is to realize not only to get the right people on the bus, the right person in the right seat on the bus, but what happens when you have to say it's time for them to get off the bus. They're toxic. Nobody likes that. But there comes times when you're the one, the buck stops here. You have to deal with it. Courageous leaders protect the God-given vision in the midst of criticism, hard economic times, and setbacks. But here's the key. What is the God-given vision? And it's a shared vision. Yes. It's not just your vision. When leaders are at their extraordinary best, they are inspiring shared visions. People feel ownership of it. But you have to protect that. You have to keep pulling that rubber band, knowing that you're walking in the direction that the Lord wants you to walk in. But there's a guiding coalition of people in the community that feel the same way, and you're all believing and trusting God that this is the direction to go in. Number 7, courageous leaders implement needed changes even when they're uncomfortable or not immediately popular. Here's the thing. Most of the time when change comes, it's not immediately the popular thing. This is the reason why you have to do several things. Create a sense of urgency. Create a sense of urgency. Secondly, develop and pull around you a guiding coalition, a group of people that believe that this is the right direction to go. Then create a vision, as Bishop was saying, a futuristic thought. What's the vision? Where are we going? What's the destination? And that destination, that vision has to be so compelling, so desirable that people will want to get on board with you. Because if people aren't following you, you're just taking a walk. And you're not creating followers anyway. You're supposed to be creating leaders. Courageous leadership. Key points to mastering conflict. Now, why do I bring this up right now real quick? Because if you're going to be a courageous leader, you better get ready for conflict. If you do that, it's not if there's going to be conflict, it's when. So good conflict requires trust. You see what I said there? Good. Is there such a thing as good conflict? And the answer is yes, there are things like good conflict. A leader must be willing to engage in and provoke productive conflict. That's eating the ugly frog. That's one of the hardest things I ever, and I still struggle with it. But knowing that there are times when I just have to just wade right out there into it, it's a very tough discussion, but I need to just wade out there. Someone don't agree. Well, why don't you agree? Let's talk. But how can I talk and keep it under the radar, under that red line to where it is productive, to where we're agreeing, maybe even to disagree, but we're having a very good conversation, even provoking, stepping out there and saying, you know, maybe there's a problem here that we need to deal with. Conflict will sometimes be uncomfortable, and I said, do you think? How many of you know that conflict in the church is very uncomfortable? Right? But we cannot keep doing this, folks. Conflict in the church is killing our reputation, destroying us. So we've got to wade out there in it and say, let's talk about this stuff, to where we can be more reputable and credible in the community. And here's the thing. Conflict management and learning to deal with conflict is a skill that can be learned. We can get better at it. Take a picture while you can and move it on. All right. Here's one principle and way of dealing with it. If I ignore it, maybe it'll go away. He ain't going away. Somebody's got to deal with it, right? Here's another way. JJ, I don't know which one to tell you is worse, to tell you the honest truth. As I go through here, you're going to have to help me, right? Because you know that this is true. You've been around this thing long enough to know. Too many people ignore it, don't they? It's not just in the church, it's in families, it's in personal relationships. I've talked to several of you just while I've been here in the last few months. You come up to me and talk to me about how you've been ignoring the way certain people have been treating you. And I got 2 words for you. Stop it. You know, you can't keep doing that. Head in the sand is not a strategy. It's just not. You're trying to ignore it and it's not going to go away. Some people like to fight at the drop of a hat. Have you figured that out? The majority of you in this room do not like to fight. The majority of us, statistics say in this room, are avoiders of conflict. We're more likely to be the head in the sand people. We're more likely to be the guy that's saying, I know that he's looking at me, but I don't want to look him back at him. That he's scared. Right? He'll go away. But he's not going to go away. But there's a few in the room who actually like this. They like the drop of the hat. Some people actually enjoy stirring it up. Anybody have anybody in your church that's like this? Right? Anybody got anybody in your family that's like this? Anybody married? No, I'm not even going to go. Likes to just stir it up. Look here, and they're proud of it. Now you think I'm joking, but I'm not. This is stuff that's too good. You can't make this stuff up. You've been in this thing long enough now, right? There are some people that like this. They get up in the morning wondering, what can I stir today? are trying to be funny. Nothing makes them happy for them to lay their head on the pillow at night and say, I got it. I got it. She can't sleep tonight over what I said to her. And she said it to you knowing it was going to upset you. But I just know the Lord wanted me to tell you. This is what I call in the altar counsel.
Come on.
You ever had somebody do that? You're in the altar praying, you get in touch with God. Oh, the Lord just wanted to want me to tell you this. I've been holding this against you. And I need to tell you, no, the Lord didn't have anything to do with it. You're using this moment to do a spiritual beat up on me.
Yes.
You're saying God's involved. Some people like to stir it up. Now here's the great question. Here it is. Remember I told you a few moments of self-brutal honesty is worth a lifetime of self-deception. You ready for me to unveil this? Here you go.
Oh my God.
Could it be that sometimes you're the stir stick? I really believe this. And it happens in my life now that I'm aware of it. Awareness is curative, say it. Awareness is curative. There are some times now in my life. It comes with awareness and maturity, discipline, self-control, want to. There's a want to. There are times when I start to say something when I'm with people and I just don't say it.
Dial it back.
That's great.
There you go.
I dial it back. And I feel really good after the fact
Oh, yeah.
because I feel like I triumphed over me. I triumphed over the flesh for a moment. Right? Just didn't need to stir that. Didn't need to say that. Here's what the stir sticks cause. Right? That's that drama. How many of you could do with a little less drama? Right?
Got both hands.
So for heaven's sakes, let's stop being the drama queen or the drama king. Oh, or could it be? Yes, maybe. Common results of the stir sticks. And the church has got to get away from this if we're going to be what God has called us to be. Here's the problem with all of that. If you don't get at that and help people to stop being the stir stick, you just get all kinds of problems and conflicts and explosions in your church and in your relationships. Don't raise your hand. Don't say anything. Don't make any communication with your body language. But how many of you know that we could do with a lot less conflict in our lives? And we cause some of it. So we need to stop it. Or this is what happens. We eventually come apart. And you got to ask yourself, well, what role did I have in it? Did I have any role in it? And this is where we end up going to, right? This is where a lot of the mental breakdowns come from. This is where a lot of the burnouts come from. It's just these little flies that are spoiling our own anointing, our own lives. And it all has to start with us. Number 3, failure to communicate with clarity. To communicate. Don't expect what you don't clearly communicate. Now, I know that this is a crystal ball, and I'm not asking any of you to go buy one. But I think that sometimes we kind of look at communication as this. It's like if we say it, everybody just understands us, but they don't. I've told you that I stood at the back of the church on 2 or 3 Sundays and asked people what I said that morning, and about 90% of what people told me I didn't even have in my notes. That's the truth. It's like, what in the world? must have been listening to somebody else online this morning while I was preaching. They might have been doing that too. Especially if they got their ear pods in, right? That's a good sign they're not listening to you, by the way, if they got those in on Sunday morning. Failure to communicate with clarity. Number one, to communicate. Number two, to do it clearly. John Maxwell made popular leadership is influence, right? But here's what I want to say to you. Influence is this. Influence is the capacity to have an effect on the character, the development, or behavior of someone else. And if that's true, then I think we've been failing as pastors. Because ask yourself, has character, development, and behavior in our people been changing? It should. If we have any influence, this is what it looks like. 2 Timothy 2:2 principle. Paul said, I'm going to give it to Timothy. Timothy, I want you to give it to reliable people who will give it to other reliable people who will pass it on. That's what pastoring should be looking like. It's a multiplication of influence. Here it is again. So how is this happening in your life and in your church? And again, these are fatal flaws. If you're the blockade, if you're Paul just sitting up there and you don't have any witnesses, Timothy's, or anybody else who's getting it and is passing it on, then my Lord, where's the blockage? We got to open that up. Say it out loud. Statistics go all the way across the board, but as many as 9 out of 10 people never disciple anyone. Never. And churches don't even have a discipleship program. So when we talk about equipping the saints, is equipping the saints in the Bible? But what kind of equipping the saints program do we have? Discipleship is a choice. To be one is a choice, and to make one is a choice. Leadership is influence, but leadership is also communication. This is what we do for a living. We communicate as leaders. We pass on information, news, thoughts. We spread stuff to others. So it's not just about communicating from the pulpit, it's about communicating all the time. Over coffee, over lunches, over dinners, over the cell phone, over the internet. We're communicating. And we have to be communicating clearly. I like what this individual said. Developing excellent communication skills is absolutely essential to effective leadership. The leader must be able to share knowledge and ideas to transmit a sense of urgency and enthusiasm to others. If a leader can't get a message across clearly and motivate others to act on it, that's behavior, then having a message does not even matter.
Wow.
That's power. That should change the way we preach every sermon. What do I want to see as a result of this message today, of this conversation today? Matthew 20, Jesus called them together and said, you know that the rulers of the Gentiles lord it over them, and their high officials exercise authority over them. Not so with you. Still the pyramid, top down, command and control. I'm up here, y'all down here, is still the way we think about it. But Jesus said, turn this thing upside down. The Irish playwright, he said it this way. The single biggest problem with communication is the illusion that it has been accomplished. The illusion of communication. Here's what we say. They don't listen to me. They're not paying attention. They just don't get it. But in reality, it is not their job to get it. As the communicator, did you know this is what the research says? The responsibility falls on you to make sure they understand what you are saying. So this says, remember, these are derailers. These are fatal flaws. They can destroy our ministries. We can go through decades and decades of preaching sermons and not be communicating. Because true communication gets results. It used to be a fear. It's not so much anymore. But all of us should be concerned that we come down to our deathbed and we ask ourselves a question. Did my life count for anything? I preached a lot of sermons. I did a lot of stuff. But did it matter? And a lot of it involves communication. I love this one. If you have children, you're probably very familiar with the phrase, how many times do I have to tell you? And the little boy says, just maybe one more time. Y'all remember the pastor that said he preached the same sermon 7 Sundays in a row? He was new. The elders came to him and said, when are you going to preach something else? He said, when y'all start doing this, I'll move on to sermon number 2. We could honestly stop preaching if people could just say, everybody just do what you already know to do. And let's get out there and do the work of the King. And probably we'd never have to preach another sermon. John Carter at Harvard University put it this way, without credible communication, say credible communication, and a lot of it, the hearts and minds of others are never captured. When you think you've communicated, you've under-communicated by 10,000%. How many of you have ever had an event and you've emailed, you've put it on social media, you've put it over the urinals and in the stalls, you have handed it out, you've done snail mail, you've made phone calls, you've got it on the phone tree, only to have one of your top leaders get upset at you. You didn't tell me about it. Anybody ever heard of that? Yeah, see, I see you, Brendan. You know you have. You even got somebody's face right there in your mind's eye. That's crazy, isn't it? You know what they're really saying? You didn't take me out, sit right across from me, and invite me to work for us. Well, maybe you want to figure out who those people are and decide that that's got to be put into your arsenal of communication. Or you're going to keep getting that. Yeah. When?
Yeah, do you think he put hearts before minds on purpose?
The hearts and minds of others. I don't know. We'd have to write John and ask him. But that's a good question, right? Because you're thinking about that, Mr. C. See, hearts and minds. I don't know that I would, and maybe he did. Knowing him, he probably did. But I think it's just a combination of the heart and the mind, and that there is a connection. But we need to engage people intellectually and academically and substantively, right, with content. But somehow we've got to capture their heart too, because their heart is the behavioral center.
Yes.
It's what moves them. It's what motivates them. It's that driving force. It moves them to action. But we haven't really considered that, have we? We just want to preach sermons to keep people coming back. But we want to preach sermons, and that's important, right? But we also want to preach sermons that motivate people to act and to change behavior and help them to be better people. Here's another one about communication. Explicit communication versus implicit communication. Here's what I mean. To be explicit. When we talk about clarity, you need to be more explicit. Now, I can't say this too much. In the church, we imply. We think people are getting it. We dance around stuff because we're afraid we're going to offend people, and that's probably good if it's just consideration and compassion, but explicit. You state it clearly and in detail, leaving no room for confusion or doubt, especially in a VUCA day when everything is ambiguous. You need to try to be as clear and as detailed and as direct as possible. Be clear instead of vague. And you have to ask yourself, ask your team, when we are writing things, when we are communicating, when we are advertising, let's ask ourselves, have we been clear? What mechanism, what vehicle are we not using? A large portion of the church and organization stopped using snail mail. Well, listen, as long as baby boomers are alive, we like snail mail. Did y'all know that? I like to get it. You know why baby boomers like to get it? Because we like to put it on the refrigerator. Does anybody in this room still do that? All right, raise your hand if you do that. Look at this. Everybody look around this room. How many of you would like to have your church bulletin or something that you sent out hanging on people's refrigerator? I would, because that would tell me they're being communicated with. But if you don't snail mail it, does everybody know what I mean when I say snail mail? Okay. I said something about Shaquille O'Neal the other day and somebody didn't even know who he was. That's a sin. Am I right? I said something about Jim Croce. They didn't know who he was. How many of you know who Jim Croce is? I said the Beatles, and a girl said, who's that? There's a movie coming out. I'm very excited about it. I'm sorry. Don't de-church me. But it's about Elvis Presley. We got a whole generation don't even know who he is. That's a sin. He was Pentecostal before we were Pentecostal. That was ugly, wasn't it? Don't do that. She's like, oh my God, he didn't get that. Body language tells me a lot, right? No, the truth is, and I think the movie's going to bring it out, he learned a lot of his stuff from Pentecostal churches, from the black church in Mississippi. Did you know that? A lot of his culture came out of the black church. They impressed him so much, and he picked up on that, right? And so, anyhow, communicate clearly. If you are vague, you are not making your point, and you are often avoiding conflict. Now I want you to ask yourself, you have to really be honest with yourself. When I'm just implying stuff, when I'm dancing around stuff, you've got to ask yourself, am I really trying to avoid something? Or do I need to be more clear and explanatory? Here's the problem with all that, it's just miscommunication. Clean it up. And awareness is curative, so this helps you. Number 4, failure to build and mend relationships up, down, across, internally, and externally. It's all about relationships. Say it. It's all about relationships. We have to understand. I've told my 2 girls, 38 and 35 now, all their life. It's all about relationships. I start to say that and they laugh and Daddy, we know. Be careful how you treat your paper boy or paper girl because they might one day be your judge. Oh yeah. Never, you with me? Never burn a bridge. Never burn a bridge. They may have treated you awful. But when you walk away, do your best to walk away with dignity and kindness. Because that relationship might come back to you 10, 15, 20, 30, 40 years down the road. Not just through them, it might come back through their child or their grandchild. You don't want to be one of the stories they talk about over the dinner table. I'm telling you, this stuff is true. So relationships are important. We build relationships. Say it out loud. We build relationships. In a day where there's loneliness and an epidemic of isolation, the church uniquely has an ability to address this. Loneliness is an epidemic proportions at two ends of the spectrum. Number one is our elderly. Those that are especially widows and widowers are extremely lonely. And the church needs to strategically reach out to them. If they are an older couple, 70s and over, typically, they are lonely. The church needs to have strategic, intentional mechanisms to help them. The other end of the spectrum, believe it or not, those college age and younger are extremely lonely. The most connected generation of all time through devices. But you take a look. You take a look at 8 or 10 young people sitting together. They've all got their phones out. And they're communicating through their device, not each other. My 2 granddaughters just went to a cheerleading camp in Crossville, Tennessee this week, Monday through Friday. When they got there, my daughter took them over an hour and a half to Crossville. And on the way back, she snapshot 2 cell phones sitting in her car seat beside her. She's on the way home. She said, "This is different." And I said, "What in the world is that?" She said, "It's Ella's and Marley's cell phones." I said, "What?" You granted, you know what this is about, right? Because you do youth camps. Do y'all do this? Require them to give up their cell phones? Do you wish you could? They require it. You parents say no. They could not come to this camp unless they gave up their cell phones. They had opportunities twice, on Tuesdays and Thursdays, to call their parents, to get in line at a payphone, which was a history lesson, right? And they got to call home. But they would not let them, she said, and she was thrilled. You know why? As a mother, she said they would not have made relationships and new friends if they had had those phones. So that's leadership. I like that. Somebody had to say, we're going to bite that bullet. Because they will not grow deep relationships unless they don't have that. Well, you can have different opinion on it, I know. We'll fight that battle somewhere. We mend relationships too, don't we? We should be mending relationships. Here's how healthy relationships versus the loneliness and silence. Here it is. This is a cross, internally, externally. This is the way your life should look. These are the relationships, like a matrix of people, inside, outside the church, all around you, up, down, across. So you have to look at yourself, maybe even draw something like this, and say, who are the people in my life? Now, I'm not talking about just best friends, I'm just relationships at any level. And they should be on different levels. Problem is this, if you don't have relationships, as we go deeper into the future and change happening the way that it is, at the speed that it is, there's going to be even more isolation. Number 5, we need to take a break right now and then come back. But yeah, we're going to take one now. Okay, let's take a break right now. We're going to take about a 5 to 7 minute break, okay? And then we'll come back and we'll get those last few trays. Okay. That's humiliating. All right, number 5. Now, let me preface this based on a couple things that people said during the break. These 10 derailers are the things that the research says are those top 10 things that typically derail, that become fatal flaws. Most of us wouldn't even have thought of these things because we get so focused on 2. And you notice we're not even dealing with those. Why? Because those 2 are no-brainers. Jezebel and Judas. Sex and money will destroy your ministry faster than anything. Immorality and misuse of finances. But I don't deal with those explicitly, neither did the research, because they're just no-brainers. And yet, how many people could call it an act? I don't know what you have to do to stop that. Number one, with money, make yourself accountable. If you're a pastor or a person working in a church or something, don't give yourself access to the cash, to the money. Stay away from it. Always have more than one signature on the check. Don't even, it should be policy.
It is.
And it is policy. And don't, if possible, don't even let one of the signatures be yours unless you just want to be able to see for accountability purposes. And in terms of immorality, sexual situations, listen, men and women, and I have to say this as grown-ups among all of us, people have problems with sex. They have issues. It's like addictions. Get help, for heaven's sakes. It'll destroy you. Get help. And stop it. Okay, number 5. Failure to identify, recruit, and develop team members. And the emphasis is really on the development of team members. I call it the Jethro dilemma. From Exodus 18, what you are doing is not good. You cannot handle it alone. This was his father-in-law coming to him, giving him advice, right? And he was a heathen priest. And so he told him, you got to learn to delegate. You can't do it alone. Healthy cultures are built by the way leaders, and I want you to make note of these things. If I were you, I'd take a picture of this. I would definitely write down these things, because this is the way you build culture in your church, in any organization. It's the way you recruit. Number one, you ought to be spending the whole summer recruiting people for next fall and next year. September through August 31st. Recruit, select, develop, promote, and retire members, people who are in positions, that are on staff, paid and volunteer. You ought to give some thought to all of these things, to how you're doing this. If you're not doing this, then you can create a toxic culture real easy. And the problem is that too many churches have toxic cultures, which it just doesn't even seem right, does it? But you can sense it when you walk in the door.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
What is retirement age? Whoa, that's a new one. We were talking about this, right? Was it Richard?
Yeah.
Richard and I were talking about this. He's 62. He don't want to know, but I'm older than him. I'm his granddaddy. I'm 64. And that's not what it used to be. I told you Dr. Arrington's 92. You have to think, and more, they used to celebrate centenarians on the morning shows in the morning. They don't do it anymore. Why? Too many people are busting 100 wide open. Now you're going to live, bar a disease or an accident, you're going to live 20 to 40 years longer than the previous generation because of medical technology, healthier lifestyles, etc. Most of us, and here's what I say to Richard, to me, and to you. Think like your Dr. Arrington. And that at 92 to 95 years old, you're still going to be able to function and hold a job. So that is an entire second or a third adulthood that most generations didn't think about. So in terms of money, you got to be thinking about that. You got to be thinking about preparing for alternate sources of income. Social Security is a part of it. If you're opted in, it's not going to be all of it. You've got to have some investments. Train yourself so that you will have, this is the reason why I say everybody ought to go back and get all the education they can get. Because that's the number one thing that prepares you to go into the future, is having that degree. I'm just one voice, and there's several of you in this room that I am pushing for you to get your master's and your doctor's degree. If I could push for you, I'd say everybody in this room get a PhD. I know that sounds crazy, but just think, you're going to live to be 90 to 110 years old. They say that a little girl born today will live to be 120 years old on average. It's a different day. It's different expectations, and you got to prepare yourself to go into the future. or you're going to be caught flat-footed and you're not going to be able to take care of yourself nor your family. But it's not just about taking care of yourself. I want to see you thrive. I want to see you live life with purpose and be able to have input. And so you've got to be able, and listen, we should be teaching our people this stuff. You know, we live generations, please don't think I'm a heretic, but I grew up in a generation that constantly preached that Jesus was coming. Now, okay, hang on, hold on to that. I still believe Jesus is coming. He just hasn't come yet. And the disciples lived as if he was coming during their lifetime.
Yep.
So there's that constant dynamic tension. Dr. Arrington calls it the already not yet, right? If you've ever had him as a professor, you know that. We're already living or having faith in the kingdom, but we're not yet there. So you live in dynamic tension. And I think that sometimes if we're not careful, we give people a scapegoat where they take the rapture of the church or heaven as an irresponsible cop-out. I don't have to do anything, Jesus is coming. We've had preachers that didn't put money away because they believed that was going to happen in their lifetime, and they get to retirement age and they don't have anything. I still believe he's coming, ladies and gentlemen, and it might be today. So I want to live my life as if he comes today, but I also want to be prepared as if he's not going to come in my lifetime or my children's lifetime, so that we can keep doing the work of the kingdom. Does that make sense? Yeah. And so we live in that dynamic tension of all of this, and we definitely don't want to have toxic cultures in our church. Number 6, a failure, we derail ourselves because of bullying and abrasive behavior that interferes with your leadership effectiveness. The problem with that is people do not leave bad companies or bad churches. They leave bad people. You hearing me? People don't leave organizations, they leave people. So I read some statistics. I was reading yesterday. Made the mistake of opening up a Harvard Business Review article. Listen what it said. It said that 6 out of 10 employees would like to see their present boss fired. And with about most of you in this room shaking your head this way, that don't give me any cause for joy. To 40% want to see their present boss fired. That means we as leaders can do a better job engaging our people. Should. Churches, pastors, let's say. Number 7, failure to be aware of your need for competency development. Competencies are skills. We can do better. We can grow and we can learn. There's so much out there right now, you don't have to spend a lot of money. I tell people, I had somebody a couple years ago said this to me, said, I'm going to pay $16,000 to go to 2 weeks at Harvard to do an executive leadership program. And I said, okay, but I've got an alternative for you that costs you much less. I said, now, it's Harvard, it's Yale, it's Stanford, it's Princeton, okay. Right, it's MIT, they have these executive leadership. Almost any reputable university today has an executive leadership track. Usually they have a short program of a week or 2. It's going to cost you $10,000 to $20,000. Now it's them. It's going to be really good. But here's what I say. Get my videos for $100. I'm serious. I stole all their stuff. What is good research anyway? Finding everybody else's stuff and putting it together. I don't abuse it. I tell you whose stuff it is, right? This is Ken Blanchard stuff. This is Harvard stuff. And I quote everything. Do it appropriately. Say whose stuff it is. But I've done the hard work. Get 10 essential skills. I've got 3 video. How many we got left, Josh? We got 4 left. Get it. I'm telling you. This is worth a lot of money. I know. Go do John Maxwell's stuff. How many John Maxwell's people do we have in here that had his training? Raise your hand. Look at that. Look at that. Look at that. Look at that. See? Good stuff. One of my best friends just graduated from John Maxwell School. Great stuff. Right? Go do that. You know, unless you are in a company or a field that requires that and they're going to pay for it, don't go do that. Take my stuff. It'll cost you a whole lot less. And you don't have to write papers or take tests. But now the onus is on you. You got to listen. You got to apply it. But they're not going to do that for you either. They'll just take your money. They don't care as long as you write the check. I don't care as long as you write the check either. I'll take a $100 bill, 520s, it don't matter. Failure to be aware of your need for competency development. Let me tell you something. Nothing bothers me anymore to see people at big churches act like they don't need anybody to help. Nothing bothers me anymore to see people at little churches that feel like they don't need anybody to help. How many of you believe after 8 days with me that there are plenty of ministers in Pennsylvania that should have been here? How many of you have asked this question? Where has this stuff been? Why didn't I have this 20, 30 years ago? Anybody ever asked that question? Listen, number one piece of feedback I get. Why didn't I have this 20, 30 years ago? So what I want you to do is take the stuff you've learned, pour it into somebody else. Nothing make me happy. The training for trainers coming up in October. I'm hoping that those 80 people that are already signed up, it's full. I hope they'll take it to a different level. I hope you'll take it, run it through your grinder. I hope some of you will come out of here with books, with seminars, with workshops, with conferences. I hope some of you will dream big. I've got a dream percolating. Let me go ahead and tell you what it is. In October of 2023, I'm going to be having my biggest conference, a 2-day conference at Walt Disney World, on the boardwalk in Walt Disney World. And John Cotter, it looks like, is going to be one of my guest speakers from Harvard. Why would I invite someone from Harvard to come and speak? An unusual suspect who is the guru of organizational change, because the church needs to hear this. Oh, but it's Disney. Hey, listen, those top officials at Disney, they got some problems maybe, but most of the rank and file at Disney are just people like you and me that live and love and work. My daughter and son-in-law work for Disney, singing for Disney. So I'm not going to punish them for something that they're doing every year. But I'm dreaming big. It's going to cost me probably $100,000 just to put on this conference. It's a big risk. But how many of you believe I ought to take it? Anybody? Yeah, there's only going to be 600 seats. So when you see this advertisement come out at the General Assembly, I start grabbing it. You don't have to stay on campus, but if you want to, or on property, but you can get your whatever, but you ought to be able to jump in there. 2 full days on Disney property. It's going to be great. So, competency development. You've got to be growing. This is not the cure-all. You've got to be growing your own stuff, right? You don't know what you're doing. That's what it means to be incompetent. You're not hitting the mark. And the problem there, why incompetent people think they're amazing. That's one of the most common problems. Incompetent people that think they're amazing. You met them, you 8, failure to be aware of how you use your emotions, loss of composure, and emotional stability. You're losing it all over everybody. And you don't think that it makes a big difference. Those who lack emotional intelligence will self-destruct long before success is able to flourish. This means self-aware and social aware. Self-awareness, social awareness. I'm aware of what's going on inside of me when I'm losing my temper, when I'm emotionally hijacked, when I'm being too aggressive, when I'm coming off as being mean, when I'm coming off as being too chatty, when I'm coming off as the monkey swinging from the rafters, when I'm coming off as being too slow or too fast, when I'm coming off as being too petty because of my preciseness and my detail orientation, when I'm coming off as being too out of the box because I like being innovative and all that kind of thing. See what I'm saying? And I dial it back or I dial it up. But most of the time, I'm going to lean into who I am with knowledge that there are occasions when I will need my emotional intelligence to tell me when to dial it back. The problem is, if you're not careful, you become a puppet to your emotions. And I've said this, I'm going to say it again, one of my favorite phrases, your emotions are not good custodians of truth. Just because it feels good doesn't mean it's right. It could be terribly wrong in this situation. Number 9, failure to read the room or the emotional frequency of others, the dynamics of situations and relationships. Learn to read the room. If you don't, the problem is you don't see the way you're showing up to others. This is where we need feedback. How am I showing up? Pull people around you that are honest with you. You solicit that feedback. Number 10, failure to establish mentoring and coaching relationships with people you admire and respect, that you believe that you can learn from. That's up and down. You mentoring somebody, some people, and you getting mentored. And remember that you don't have to know these people. You can just read their stuff, grab their stuff, but you feel like they're pouring into you. The problem is, you do not reach your full potential. One of the number one things the Center for Creative Leadership in Greensboro says that a leader needs to reach their full potential is a mentor and coach. We don't ever talk about it. One of the things I wish we could do for administrative bishops that I'm really pushing for is mentors and coaches. Even if we get them out of our own tribe, get some of the best, and I'm working on something on that regard right now that would serve in that capacity. You fail to reach your potential. How many of you would like to have some bonus material since I got 9 minutes? Nobody wants it?
Yeah, bring it.
Okay, the 3 of you I'll hold over and we'll no. All right, let me give you some right here. Number 1, or this is 11, failure to see duplicity in yourself. Say duplicity. This is duplicity.
Whoa.
Here's another way of looking at it. You ever called somebody two-faced?
Yeah.
You ever said to somebody you're doing one thing but you're saying another? Or you're saying one thing, doing another?
No.
That's duplicity. And the Bible says that this kind of person is what?
Unstable.
They're unstable in all their ways.
Not some of them. All of them.
Jesus said, let your yea be yea and your nay be nay. Be single-minded.
Yes.
Be clear. Have an opinion. The problem is, if you're a person with duplicity, you will get a certificate. But it will be a certificate of hypocrisy. This award certifies that the following named person, fill in your name, is a hypocrite of the first order for saying one thing and doing just the opposite. Lord forbid, right? Here's 5 maximum. This is double bonuses. So on your certificate, I'll give you a star. As you're walking out the door, Rob. No. But let's just jump in. Maxims, old sayings, or common expressions. I love these. You ready? Here we go. This don't cost you anything extra. Consider to be folk wisdom because they are so often true. Maxim number 1. I love it. Do thyself no harm.
Okay.
Say it out loud.
Do thyself no harm.
How many people you know that are constantly doing stuff? It's like, why are they doing that? Do they not realize that that's not appropriate? Right? Do thyself no harm. Maxim number 2. I love this one. Don't give anyone a club to beat you with. Say it out loud. In other words, you got self-destructive behavior. Like, why did you say that? Did they really just say that out loud? Why are they doing that? Publicly. You know? Maxim number 3. Oh, the banana that gets away from the bunch gets peeled. Say it out loud. I tell my church council this every time. We go in here, while we're in session, we're going to debate, we're going to have constructive criticism. We're going to have intellectual opposition. I value the fact that we struggle to find the best decision, and that means we have to go at it with one another because we're in here representing the church and the kingdom of God. But once we make a decision, we are one bunch. When we go out of here, you don't say, I didn't vote for it. And they usually do it with that face. Right? So you tell them, the banana that gets away from, this is about loyalty.
Yes.
This is about unity.
Yes.
This is about togetherness. But we get to voice our opinions, we just do it in the right place at the right time. And then we become one. Maxim number 4. There's a time to keep silent and a time to speak. Do you believe this is biblical? Yeah. There are some times that your brain ought to say, whoa. Don't say that. Probably ought not go there. I was watching John Adams a couple months ago. Anybody watch this on TV? It's a great series, by the way. If you like history, this is a great series. And he was doing something, you know, the patriot, John Adams, he was doing something, this was his wife, and they were sitting at a table, and he needed to get something done, but he, in front of this other politician, he didn't say something that he should have said. He had an opinion that he should have said that would have encouraged different behavior, but he kept his mouth shut, and his wife said this French phrase to him, sitting at the table. I don't know about you, but I've got my computer or my phone when I'm watching stuff. And when they say something, I can pause it and I go look it up.
Yeah.
Like, man, she said this, qui tacit consentia. Who's the French smart aleck?
We're the French.
I heard it. Yeah.
Someone white.
You got it. You can teach me that way. What's happening to me? You just shut me down. Tell me.
The mic. The mic.
Okay, good stuff. All right. This is French and it whatever means, but watch this. Here's what it meant. He who is silent is taken to agree.
Yes.
So sometimes you need to speak up. And sometimes you don't. That takes wisdom, doesn't it? So understand that. Maxim number 5. There are consequences to your actions or to your inaction. And we need to be aware of it. Inaction is perhaps the greatest mistake of all. You know what to do, you're just not doing it. I can't tell you the people who have told me that they're going to write a book. I'm 2 books ahead of them. I'm going to write 2 more this summer. Did you hear me? I'm going to write 2 more this summer. Now, what did I do by this announcement?
The world. You have to do it.
Well, it's going to be my 10 cents. I'm going to write 1 book on each one of 10 cents, starting with the Gabriel Heart. Shorter books, the books that people can wrap their brain around and they can get take with them. Then the next one, self-awareness. And knowing me, it ended up being a whole lot longer than what I first said there. Right? Because you know me, that's right. But we want to take action. I want to tell you, take action. The devil's greatest strategy is this. Just tell them to put it off till Do something else. Inaction will hurt you. I'm going to stop right here. You ready? Leadership from the arena. We need leaders, Pennsylvania. I'm going to leave you with Roosevelt's Man in the Arena. I would find this somewhere and I would put it framed somewhere in your office, somewhere on your desk, somewhere where you can have it, where you can read it often and encourage other people to read it. This is my challenge to you. It is not the critic who counts. Say that out loud. Just push pause. When you're in the arena, plenty of people won't criticize the way you're doing it. But they don't count. It's not the man who points out how the strong man stumbles where the doer of deeds could have done them better. The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who strives valiantly, who errs and who comes short again and again, because there is no effort without error and shortcuts. But who does actually strive to do the deeds, who knows great enthusiasms, the great devotions, who spends him or herself in a worthy cause, who at the best knows in the end the triumph of high achievement, and who at the worst, if he or she fails, at least they fail while daring great, so that his or her place shall never be with those cold and timid souls who neither know victory nor defeat. Pennsylvania, we need leaders. Stand with me, if you would, please. Can you believe you sat through 8 days with me? Well, 7. One of them was on Zoom. But we made it. Look at there. Look at there. Isn't that a good graphic? Woo! We made it. Graduation celebration. All right, Brother Josh, you want to give some direction? You want to take a short break, or what do we want to do, Bishop?
Well, I just want to say first and foremost how proud that I am of you. Of course, being